Good evening and welcome to the Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, June 14th. And at this time, I would like to ask our senior patrol leader for Boy Scout Troop 368, Caleb Porritt, to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Porritt.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. With that, I will ask for an approval of the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And now I'll seek approval for our regular agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion and support. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our next item on the agenda, and it's great to see that we have a packed house here this evening, is a privilege presentation. And the board would like to present a resolution commending and thanking Boy Scout Troop 368 for its dedication, commitment, and service to Grand Blanc Township for 50 years. I think we have quite a few of the Scouts here, and that's fabulous. We have with us this evening actually Mr. Harry Wagner, who was the very first Scoutmaster 50 years ago. Mr. Wagner, please come forward. Also, we have Mr. Porritt, who is the current Scoutmaster. And we have also with us Michael Weber. And Mike, your title is the MCC Commissioner.
I am. Also the Chartered Organizational Rep for the Boy Scout Troop.
Okay. With that,
Past
okay. Take a moment and read the resolution that we have here. It is whereas Boy Scout Troop 368 has been continuously operating in Grand Blanc Township for 50 years, and whereas Boy Scout Troop 368 has been and continues to be a wonderful asset to Grand Blanc Township, and whereas Boy Scout Troop 368 has provided leadership to and has instilled quality values in all the young men that have been part of 368, and whereas Boy Scout Troop 368 has produced 123 Eagle Scouts through its leadership and mentoring. 123 Eagle Scouts. Can you believe that? It's phenomenal. Whereas the Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees would like to express its deepest appreciation and thanks to Boy Scout Troop 368 for the role it plays as a vital part of the Grand Blanc community, and congratulates it on its 50th anniversary. And now therefore be it resolved by the Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees, by this resolution, commends and thanks Boy Scout Troop 368 for its dedication, commitment, and service to Grand Blanc Township. Be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees present to Boy Scout 368 the original resolution as an indication of the Township's sincere appreciation. That's signed by Treasurer Earl Guzak, Clerk Kathy Lane, and myself, Scott Bennett, Supervisor. Congratulations and thank you very much for all your work in the Township. This is part of the troop, or most of part of the troop. Let's have a round of applause for these. 123 Eagle Scouts. You do the math over 50 years, how many a year that is, and it's just phenomenal. I went to the 50th anniversary along with probably many of you, and it was phenomenal. The evening was phenomenal, number one. They retraced the 50 years with a slideshow with pictures from each decade and with the leadership from each of those years, and just phenomenal what you men do and you young men do for our community. So I can't thank you enough for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
it is sincerely appreciated what has happened during the last 50 years. 50 years ago, I didn't have any idea that the troop would continue as it is, but it is. And we hope that it keeps going continually that way. I'd like to tell you one story, and I'll make it short. We had one of the fellows who was made an Eagle Scout. Am I coming through all right?
You will now.
Who was made an Eagle Scout. His name was Steve DeCoo. He was made an Eagle Scout. He went into the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado. He came back and had his uniform on, and he was what we call a full colonel or a bird colonel, which many of you are saying, yes, you know what the insignia is, and that's an eagle on his shoulder. And he says, Harry, I want to thank you for helping me get that first eagle, because that first eagle helped me get this eagle. Thank you.
And the Boy Scout group wants to get a little bit of a civic lesson tonight, so they're going to stick around for a little bit and hear some more presentations. So I think you picked a great meeting to attend. With that, we would like to open the floor for citizen comments, and this would be for township business and probably unrelated to the public hearing that we're having. So if you're here for the public hearing, we'll save that for that portion of the meeting. But we'll start over here on the left side of the room. Yes?
Good evening,
Mr.
Bob
Brundle.
Brundle.
Come on up front, please, Mr. Brundle. And if you could,
Another week of voice.
give us your name and address, anybody that would like to speak. And you have 3 minutes. You can turn it around. Just flip the microphone over, if you would, Mr. There we go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Before I go any further, I know of at least one Eagle Scout amongst you too, and it makes me proud to have this organization to help young people find their way and get some determination. Hey, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sir, Mr. Brundle.
Thank you. My name is Bob Brundle. I reside at 9316 Inverness Road in the township of Grand Blanc. And tonight I'm here as a representative for the committee, for the millage of the firefighters. I'm a friend of the Grand Blanc firefighters, and I'd like to just take a moment to ask each and every one of you on the board for your support. Thank you so far for all the support you've shown. However, in this day of technology, I'd like to ask that all your social media opportunities, if you would just take a moment and let them know that at least there is a millage that will be on the ballot on August 7th. And if we get out the vote, the stronger the vote, the better the outcome, I feel. So please, each and every one of you, if, well, your wallets as well, but if not just that, please, the social media is our way to go, from Instagram to Facebook to, I don't know, Alignable to LinkedIn to, and I could go on and on. Well, actually I couldn't, because I don't know of any more. So,
We'll call you off after 3 minutes.
I've used up all mine. Is my 3 minutes up yet?
No.
Thank you. Well, then I'll just cut it short.
Thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brundle.
Just so you know, Mr. Brundle was our district chairman for the New Horizon Boy Scout District for this part of the state of Michigan for 6 years. And thank you for your support with the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to all you guys.
Yeah. Please come up. If you give us your name and address, and good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Max Harrison. I reside at 7391 Waterfall Drive in Grand Blanc Township. I come representing the Grand Blanc Heritage Association, as well as everyone here that represents the Perry House property. I'd like to thank you all, first off, for continuing to support the Simeon Perry homestead, as well as the amazing history of our township. And I know that probably you've heard a lot about the Perry property, and that it is the oldest building probably in Genesee County and one of the oldest buildings in this part of southeast Michigan. But what I'd like to do is ask you guys to consider the Perry property in kind of a different light. I'm a student of history at Eastern Michigan University, and I've been pretty seriously interested in history for about 5 years now. And one of the things that I continue to learn is that history means nothing without context. And this is true of different archive records, it's true of artifacts, and it's also true of buildings. And I think that we have an absolutely amazing resource in the Perry House property, not only because it is such an old building, but because it is such an intact building and it is such an intact property. We can do things with the Perry property as a community that many townships would jump at the opportunity to do. I know that we have our biannual open house there, and we have a number of other events there. But something that we can do there is also bring in people from the community and show them firsthand just how pioneer life developed in Grand Blanc Township and in this part of Southeast Michigan as well. One of the things that I've learned is that you can show people pictures, you can show people records, but it's a whole nother thing to take people out and actually show them the property where people built their lives and where people struggled to make ends meet. And as the township continues to grow and develop and we continue to move away from that style of life, especially here, I think it's important that we remember our roots to that link and that we continue to support the Perry Township, the Simeon Perry property. And so, once again, I'd like to thank you all for your support of that, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
in response, I'd like the community to know that this gentleman, I heard at a tea party at the museum, has been learning how to do cursive for one purpose, so that he can read our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution in its original form and know what he is reading. So congratulations for wanting to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
Thank you for your input on the
Thank you.
historic
I
home.
appreciate it.
Mr. Simon?
My name is Don Simons. I live at 10352 Halsey Road, Grand Blanc Township since 1974. I'm here to represent the committee that's been working on the Perry House, and I'm hoping to see your continued support for the Perry House development as a historic site. Many places in Michigan in terms of township level have nothing like this, and when you think of this house is 170 years old, where do you see a house that isn't torn down at that age? So even having parts of it is a major thing. I would just also like to tell you in my research, and I've got the Pioneer Collections of Michigan, a full set, over and over, Grand Blanc Township is cited as a location. It was first known as the village of the Big White, which was a white trader from Detroit who was married to an Indian woman who lived at Kopnakonic, and it was the place north of Detroit. It was a destination. And of course, this was largely the first community settlement north of the Redford, northern Detroit edge that developed in southeast Michigan. 1822, the Stevens were here, 1825, the Perrys, and it was the extended family that built this, not just as a location like the Stevens family who were trading here where Little Joe's is today, but this family was an expansive, large family that brought all of the children. They were workers, and when you look at the 1859 Gielan-Jones map, you can see the Perrys all over the whole eastern portion of this township, and they were a destination for settlers after that. By the way, the people that were here, they built their structures, their shelters, their cabins, and so forth. And it was their standard policy when new people arrived, immigrants came to join them. They put them up for that until they had their structure built. So it was a community effort, and it's the beginning of a unique opportunity for us to continue developing that. And as somebody who's been pursuing, and I'm getting right off, the archaeological assets, I will tell you this is really rare to get this, and we have the physical evidence, which we show with our open houses twice a year, as our ongoing archaeological project has the material that this family actually used, right down to our now identified 1922 Ford touring car, front fender, wheel, and tube. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon.
And Mr. Simons heads up the archaeological digs out there quite frequently. Yeah, we have a gentleman coming up. Back, Mr. Bush.
Good evening. My name is Jim Bush, 5243 Lethbridge Road. One thing I wanted to bring up, not the Perry House, is in the agenda, item 9A. You talk about looking at the investment plan for the township. When you do this, I want to encourage you to think minimal risk. You are investing payroll, operation money for the township. I know it may be attractive to say, well, to do this, let's get a little bit more return, but I want to encourage you to not do that and stick with minimal risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bush. Yes, Mr. Thing.
My name is Bill Thewald. I live at 7046 Iris Court in Grand Blanc Township. I've lived in the township since 1970. I'd like to address the issue that we, in this day and age, are very cavalier about ignoring history. We have a rich heritage in this township and throughout the state of Michigan of historical buildings, historical monuments, and it seems to me that we're all too eager to cast these things aside and not recognize and maintain the historical things that we have in our own midst. And I would like to encourage that we adopt a more encouraging pattern of recognizing our history and keeping track of what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thewald. Yes, Mr. Jennings.
Good evening. My name is Marvin Jennings Jr., 5908 Maplebrook Lane, Flint, Michigan, 48507. Although it's Flint 48507 address, this is my voting district. In fact, this is my voting precinct. I am here because I am running for one of the open Genesee County Circuit Court judge seats, 1990 graduate of Grand Blanc High School. I'm looking to continue to serve this community, and so I'm asking for community support and vote when you come to the polls. You may check out our website, www.jennings4judge.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Mr. Erd? And we do have some additional seats in the front row here. I know we have a few people standing, and we have some more chairs if need be that we can grab.
Ed, 7212 Porter Road. It's at your Tuesday's meeting, an issue came up, the library snow plowing. I hope we're addressing this, okay, with our joint partner who's going to pay for it, that we're paying for it. I remember the answer the board got from our partner about the kitchen in Fire Station 1, that it wasn't in writing. So, consequently, the Fire Commission paid for the kitchen in Fire Station 1, and we paid 86% of the Commission's funding. So we paid for the fire station in Station 1. I want to make sure that doesn't happen at the library, that we do stay on top of this. And with that, I'm confident this board will take the necessary steps to solve this issue. I really am. I'm confident in this board. My opinion is this board has done a great job at being transparent, addressing things to be made fair for the residents of this township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Erd. Okay. Anybody else wish to make a comment? We'll open comments back up when we get to the public hearing. Otherwise, we will close public comment at this point. I'm sorry? Right, yeah. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes. And take it everybody's had a chance to look at those. Any additional changes?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Are the minutes
I'm
at
sorry,
this point?
the minutes.
All four as one group, or?
All four is one group. May 9th, May 10th, May 22nd, May 22nd executive meeting.
Okay, there's a motion that's been made. for support?
Support.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a question regarding to the May the 10th.
May 10th?
May 10th.
Okay.
Were May 10th minutes updated as requested?
Yes, yes, Mr. Massey, they were. And those are the ones that you got in your packet and are on the public packet on our website.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will move to the consent agenda, which we approved already. And at this point, we are going to begin our public hearing with regard to the Downtown Development Authority with a presentation by our Township Superintendent, Mr. Limita.
Can you fire
Yes.
that in? Good evening. We'll walk you through a few slides that I hope will help shed some light on what the DDA is and what it does, and so that before you maybe have the opportunity to get up during the public hearing and provide your comments to the board, that you have a better understanding of why we want to explore the creation of a downtown development authority. And so I started with, will it make sense as an economic development tool for the charter township of Grand Blanc? Because that's really what it is. The formation of a DDA is just so that we can create an economic development tool that gives us another opportunity. Scott, will you advance the slide? To provide incentives for growth and development in the community in an area that's been identified as principal use for business. This Public Act 197 of 1975 is amended that allows any city, village, or township to create a DDA, and again, in an area that is zoned and used principally for business. Go ahead, Scott. So what's the Downtown Development Authority for? The DDA prepares a development plan identifying projects and process for implementing various public projects and activities within the district that's been proposed. The DDA may also prepare a tax increment financing plan that outlines the means to finance the development plan that is created and approved by the DDA board and the township board. Once approved by the DDA board, it gets submitted to the township board. An annual budget gets prepared and approved by the DDA and then is submitted to the township board for approval. Once that's approved, the DDA board must work within their budget to conduct business without further approval. They do have the autonomy, the authority, but it is set up principally for the idea that we're going to be able to offer some incentives for business growth to generate additional tax revenue for the, not only Grand Blanc Township, but for the greater Genesee County. Go ahead, Scott. The tax increment financing, this is not a new tax or a tax increase. From a property owner, it has no effect whatsoever on the amount of taxes that you pay. It's not a tax increase, it's not a new tax. What it simply does is we generate revenue resulting from the change in the property's taxable value from the baseline. So the baseline is established once we form the DDA and we agree that those boundary map is appropriate. Whatever that level of taxes that is at that level, what that taxable value is, and right now it's just short of about $90 million worth of taxable value within that district. That becomes the baseline. Then as taxable value increases, you have the opportunity to offer incentives. It may be to extend infrastructure like water and sewer mains to an area to encourage development, or to put in roads. It's very specific about what you're allowed to use that increment financing for. So how does the money come back to the DDA? Right now, when you pay your tax bill to Grand Blanc Township, we keep about 17% of that. The rest of that gets sent to other taxing agencies within the county and state. The tax increment financing plan allows us to keep that money that we normally send to the other tax entities and use it to encourage development by advancing water and sewer mains. We can discount capital fees. We can put in roads. It has to be for public infrastructure. It could be to increase put sidewalks in, to work on roads within that district. But the entire point of it is that it's taking the money, it's freezing the taxes from the other taxing entities, and it allows Grand Blanc Township to keep that to finance the DDA so that they can expand infrastructure and create new economic development opportunities. For you as a business owner or property owner, the amount you pay or what happens doesn't make any difference. There's absolutely no change to you. It's just that the money we currently send to the county, we get to keep here and then use to encourage investment. And I did an example of if the 2018 taxable value was $100,000 and there was improvement to that property, and it created a taxable value of $150,000, that taxable value increment of that $50,000, that's the amount that we get to apply the millage to, that we get to keep. We get to keep the millage rate of that $50,000 to encourage economic development tools or activities. Scott can advance. The only thing the DDA cannot collect is a state education tax. That's going to the schools and you can't touch it. But they can collect the other local taxing governmental units. For example, library, transportation, colleges, etc. However, all of those agencies that currently we send your tax dollars to, within the next 60 days from this public hearing, because this started the clock ticking, they have 60 days for their governmental governing body to come together and pass a resolution to exempt their taxes from capture. They want to keep it. Now, why would they want to why would they want to do that? It's when they can, what we're asking them to do is partner with us. And you'll see why. Scott, can you advance? Within this district right here, this was proposed really going back to 2007. In 2007, the township had this idea to create a technology village district that would create knowledge-based jobs in the community and bring something different to our community that we don't have. So, you can advance, Scott. It allows for capture of taxes for new taxable value growth above that baseline. It creates various tools that can be used to finance eligible projects within that district. The revenues can be used for public infrastructure improvements. It's a logical next step for the township following our economic development efforts for the past 3 years. The resulting taxable value growth will eventually be shared by all taxing entities in the county supporting future governmental operations. When I say it's the logical step from the past 3 years, in 2015 we started to look again at the Technology Village project to see if it was feasible for us to move forward. We were able to develop a public-private partnership with private landowners to invest in a economic study, and it's a market assessment study that went out and looked to see if it was viable, if there was a need in the community, if this made sense for us to move forward. That study was performed by a company called Chesapeake Group, and they came back and gave us the study results that said, with 100% certainty, the Technology Village area in about 8 to 10 years could be fully filled out with what we were proposing. And it's a mixed-use village. There's some light industrial, and there's residential, office space, retail, restaurants. We have a tremendous footprint along I-75 that makes us very viable for businesses who want that visibility from I-75. That's their billboard. They're driving down I-75 and they can create their business there. If any of you are familiar with the Villages of Rochester, where there's a retail development in there, we worked that into our plan for Technology Village. And then after we got this assessment back, they said this could really happen with 100% certainty. There's a need in the community and there's a want in the community for the additional residential, retail, light industrial. We said, well, let's get the zoning in place because that's what's going to attract developers. So the Township Planning Commission and planners worked on zoning and they created the zoning district. So now we have appropriate zoning. The only thing left to do is to create an incentive to encourage that to happen. So how do you do that? Well, cities sometimes have more available tools at their disposal than we have as a township. We don't have any brownfield out there or anything like that. If you're familiar or watch this at all, you know that we created an industrial development district so we can offer IFT tax abatements and industrial facilities tax abatement. So it's the reason when you saw Magna was announced, that were 600 jobs that were going to leave Grand Blanc Township and Genesee County. We were competing against China and Mexico for where the next plant was going to be built. They had 3 plants here they wanted to consolidate. With the Flint Genesee Chamber, the Michigan Economic Development Corp., and your Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees, we worked awful hard to keep them here. A big part of that was because we were able to offer an incentive to keep those jobs here, and they made a $50 million investment in our community. Without it, we would have just lost $50 million worth of taxable value, but we would have lost 600 jobs and all the things that go with that, which is even more important. So that's one of the things you do with these economic development tools, and that's why it's so important for us to consider this DDA. You can advance. The major benefit is we're going to create an organization dedicated solely to oversee the management and operation of the Grand Blanc community's greatest opportunity for commercial expansion and investment. It brings economic growth to Genesee County and the types of new businesses that community surveys have shown over and over again are only wanted and needed here, and that will allow us to continue to attract and retain not only great employee talent, but the residents of today and tomorrow. The plan will have major regional impact far beyond our township borders, encouraging investment and growth in our community. If this was from the Genesee County Equalization Report that came out last month for 2017's numbers, if you look at the Genesee County, there's 28 units that provide taxes to make the county operations go. The taxable value for Grand Blanc Township is almost $1.3 billion. Our SEV is over $1.5 billion. The next closest to us is Flint Township at $800 million. Make no mistake, Grand Blanc Township is the economic driver in Genesee County. And we will continue to do that through things like forming the DDA that are going to give us those economic development tools that we can continue to attract sustained and appropriate investment. When you look at what happens with that district map, it doesn't change any of the zoning. None of that changes any impact. It doesn't mean that if it was zoned residential and it's included in there, it's still residential. If it was zoned light industrial, it's still light industrial. None of that changes. What it does do, though, is offer us the opportunity if somebody comes in and says, I want to buy that property, and just like they do now, if they have a different idea for zoning, they can certainly apply to the Planning Commission for a zoning change. But that wasn't our goal. We created the zoning districts that we want, and it's to encourage the growth in the zoning districts that we've developed. Creates jobs and creates opportunities. Go ahead, Scott. In 2007, Grand Blanc Township held an informational symposium with technology and development experts, community stakeholders. It had over 120 attendees. That Tech Village vision was created at that time to include focusing on creating an area of development that will attract knowledge economy investments and high-tech jobs. It was to be an incubator for business, R&D facilities, and educational institutions. Genesis Health Campus is a big part of that. They want to develop their areas. They have plans on the north side to put in an R&D facility that will bring in 400 PhD level jobs. They also want to lease out their outlots to bring in additional retail that goes well with their athletic club, the health campus. So food, retail, those kind of things. Everyone knows that Meyer owns property in this district, and they've owned it for a number of years. This could create that opportunity for Meyer to take a look at us if we are able to offer discounts, for example, on infrastructure, if that's the way the DDA and the Township Board decides to go and spend the tax incremental finance that they bring in. It's about 4,000 acres in the south central boundaries of the township, and that we followed that same plan from 2007, 2008. Because of the recession, this plan started to kick off and start to grow legs. The recession hit and it landed on a shelf, and it sat there for many years. But we've been working hard for the last 3 years to make that vision a reality, and we're close. This is the last tool we need to really make it happen. You can, the Township resurrected the Technology Village, developed a strategic plan. In 2016, we created that public-private partnership I spoke about. In 2017, we developed the zoning districts, and in 2018, the township is proposing to form that DDA to allow for the capture of incremental revenues to provide the funding for infrastructure to make it a reality. So the next steps were to, you can advance it, Scott, were to hold the public hearing, that's today. Then we're going to start scheduling meetings with those outside taxing agencies to demonstrate the benefits of allowing us to keep that incremental tax capture so that we can put it into infrastructure to encourage development. The Township Board is going to look for interested DDA board members that can bring a unique perspective to that economic development opportunities to spur investment. They'll form the DDA board, they'll work to identify an appropriate budget and a strategic plan for attracting growth and investment moving forward. So that's really an overview of why the DDA, why we want to do it. It's really an economic development tool. It gives us some incentives to offer. And we wanted to share that with you before we opened up the public hearing. I hope I've answered more questions than created, but either way, you can probably open the public hearing now, Scott.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Limita. And again, we're going to open the floor for public hearing. We'd like, when you come forward, to please give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to inform you and the board that we mailed out 373 notices to property owners, and I have 5 that are not able to come tonight, but have emailed me or called the office, and they were in total support. So I just wanted you to start out with that information, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lane. Okay, with that, is there anyone who would like to speak during this phase of the meeting to speak about the proposed DDA, or Downtown Development Authority? Otherwise, you're going to have to hear me speak a little bit. Yes, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, I'll start it off. I don't really have a lot to say, but my name is Keith Tatnan.
And your address?
And I live at 3190 East Baldwin Road.
Okay, thank you.
Wife and I have been there about 20 years, and I'm really happy to see this DDA formed and the township really moving on like it is. I think it's real important to the community, kids that are going to grow and do business in this community, and we'll, with programs like this, we'll maintain our position as top people in the community. Like I said, I'm on Baldwin Road. We've got 6 acres there, and I'm retired. I'm 73, and we've spent the last 20 years working pretty hard on it, and it's just getting kind of hard on me. I may have to be leaving that particular area pretty soon, but I've got to say, where I live is probably the best place over the last 73 years. I think it's the best place I've been. I spent 20 years there, and I'm proud of Grand Blanc. I'm proud of this board, and I'm proud of what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, I'm Dick Kramer with D. Kramer Incorporated, and we've been on Baldwin Road there since the turn of the century here. I really think I commend you, because I've seen, we're in construction also, and I've seen a lot of areas that just plain get out of control. And I think this is your opportunity, control that area, what goes in there, and kind of organize and, you know, and get the roads in and just get it developed to where it's a class area. And that's going to be a very positive thing for the township. So I commend all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. I think I recall a chicken farm out that way before D. Kramer.
Well, we kind of a chicken shit contract.
I remember from driving past it many times.
It did.
I still remember it today, my memories of it. So do we have others that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Phil Rice, and I've resided for almost 40 years at 3090 Pollock Road.
Okay.
I'm pro-business, believe me, but I'm also pro-residential. As we talk about anything, I think we also have to remember that there's those of us who reside as residents within the area. I was curious before the meeting, and I asked Mrs. Lane why one section off of Baldwin Road was excluded from this proposed development, and I was informed that that was a developed area already. I would point out that my area on Pollock Road was developed some 50 years ago as a residential area, and is still an R1 zoned residential area. I question why one section was eliminated and our little section was. Admittedly, a small section. So I guess it's a matter of discussion. Also, I don't quite understand. As I understand it, the board establishes a DDA, and then it goes from that, and nobody other than the board has to approve a DDA. That's the way I understand what you said. So it's strictly up to the board, not up to the citizens. You are our elected representatives, however, I understand. The other question I had was concerning zoning. Does this perhaps give the township or the DDA the ability to change zoning on residential property? I would hope not. We have resided in the middle of the hospital campus now for 20-some years, and we are told by the hospital that they have no interest in our property. We'll see. We're in the middle of their development area. Probably not in my lifetime, but maybe sometime in my children's lifetime, they will buy us out. I would hope that they have to approach us with our property still remaining R1. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take public comment, and then when we bring it back to the table, we'll attempt to answer probably some, if not all, these questions. Who else would like to speak? Mr. Erd?
Ed Erd, 7212 Porter Road. You mentioned incremental tax structure, that it would go to the county in each, for example, VA millage, the senior millage, the 911 millage. Each one of these things would have to be approved by them to write off to get the taxes? Or is it all taxes wouldn't be collected?
We'll clarify that too.
Clarify later?
Sure. Any others?
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Erd. Yes, please come forward.
Mike Weber, 4420 Warwick Circle. First of all, I am encouraged by the DDA. I think it's been needed for a long time and fully in support of it. The question that I have is, will there be any cooperation or work with the city in terms of this activity, or will it be solely the township by itself working on its own?
Thank you. And the city does have a DDA, but we'll cover that question as well. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, I wasn't planning to come up here, but my name is Wendy Fournier, and I reside at 1452 Bluffview Lane in the city of Grand Blanc. And I am pro business development and growing our economy, but I also like to make the statement that we proceed with caution and carefully as we protect our green spaces and our natural habitat, our wildlife, and our green spaces for future generations. So as we proceed and we do develop, let's keep those things in at the forefront of our mind.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Wanda Vandermeer, and I don't live in Grand Blanc Township, but I own the property at 10055 Saginaw, and also lots 26 and 27, approximately 14 vacant undeveloped acres right on Saginaw Street. I have some concerns, major concerns, always when the government is taking more of our rights away. You gentlemen sit here, and ma'am, you too, every week, or I don't know how often you meet, every week, every month, and you constantly pass laws, and those laws constantly inhibit our rights to do things with our own property. And that always concerns me, because it's just like you're chiseling a little away at our property rights, and we don't recognize that until, you know, something happens or it comes in conflict with it. So I'm always triggered to just pay attention when somebody's taking away our property rights. Mr. Lehman has said that you already made this decision to develop this technology area, this technology corridor, and you've already changed the zoning laws in the whole areas to reflect what you guys wanted to happen when you developed this DDA. So in essence, you've already done the zoning that you want to do. So when the gentleman asked, is there going to be zoning changes? No, because you've already done what you wanted to do. And that's quite clear. Mr. Lehman has said that there were very specific, and I didn't catch what word he said, about what you can use the funds for. And I wondered where those specifications are located.
They're actually in, you can find those through the laws that create the DDA, and be happy if you look up the Public Act that I
did read
referenced, or
that
you
this
can-
afternoon. Yeah.
So you can find in there exactly what you can spend DDA funds for, and it has to be for the public good. It has to be, it has to create a public good. It has to create a value in that DDA district.
I also reviewed where that same law that we're talking about allowed you to raise taxes by even giving new millage up to 2 mills, allows you to, a popular way I understand, is to increase the property values of everybody in the township, and even the people in this DDA district. And you don't actually increase a new tax, but you raise everybody's property values, and then we'll be paying more taxes that way. And I can't pay you any more taxes.
It doesn't increase property taxes. It doesn't increase property values.
You have the authority to, under the act, to do this.
Not to increase property values. The DDA authority has the authority to ask for a special assessment for something. That would have to be approved by the township board. They can't act unilaterally. That they could suggest, hey, we'd like to raise a mill to build bike trails if they wanted to, but that would go to the township board. They can't act unilaterally on raising a special assessment.
Mr. Lehman, I know that we were going to wait to the end to answer the question, but I think, you know, one of the things that was touched on that if maybe you could mention, because I want to make sure we clear this up right now, as far as the changing of the zoning and our public-private partnership with the owners of the property where the zoning was changed.
Sure, the only zoning that was changed was working with the property owners who requested the zoning changes because they saw what the conceptual plan was and the market assessment study showed, because it made their property much more marketable for what they wanted to do. So the only zoning changes that occurred were in conjunction with the 2 property owners. It doesn't impact any zoning. The DDA doesn't have the authority to change the zoning. The township board's not going in to change zoning. If you're zoned residential, you will remain residential. If you're zoned light industrial, you'll remain light industrial. Now, if you go to purchase the property or you yourself wanted to develop it, those processes haven't changed. The DDA has nothing to do with planning or zoning. It allows you to come in and just like you can now, you can come to the planning commission and request a zoning change because you want to build something different in there that isn't allowed in the current zoning. That doesn't change because of the creation of a DDA.
It has changed in Rochester.
It has nothing to do with the DDA though. It's if they want to change zoning, that could have been their future land use, that could have already been in their works for their master plan for their future land use. But the creation of a DDA has absolutely nothing to do with zoning changes. The two are, they don't have anything to do with each other.
The only way zoning can change is with this group right here, with the
But you brought it
recommendation.
up. You said that when we began our vision, we saw a technology, we wanted a technology area. And so all the zoning,
So future land use, there's future land use maps in every single community that's zoned.
Yes, of
all right?
course.
And so they master plan their community, and they take the time to study. They hold several public hearings. They talk to people about what do you want in your community. And the results of those master plan meetings is they come together and they start to suggest zoning changes. We want to make sure our residential is protected. We want some industrial. We want general commercial, neighborhood commercial. That still has nothing to do with the DDA process. That's something that's at work in every single community, regardless of whether they have a DDA or not. And it certainly is true in this community. Those are things that are looked at on a continual basis as part of your master plan process.
Supervisor Limita, I just want to touch on your last quandary. The DDA does not have the power or authority, nor does this board, to assess a 2% millage.
Whether or not they can do that or not, it won't happen without this board, without the Grand Blanc Township
that's
Board
what I meant,
agreeing
I'm
to it. And I can tell you with my experience with Grand Blanc Township boards, you and others, that is not likely to happen. And you will have you are the backstop to any proposed millage issuance in the DDA.
Well, the board already holds that authority. They could
They
do
are-
that right now.
They already
if
do.
They
Right.
wanted to.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions? And we will be here 5 days a week, so if you have any other questions, feel free to set up a time to meet with Mr. Limita or myself.
so is there any way you can guarantee us that our taxes will not be raised as a result of this?
Well, we don't have the influence over all the other entities in the state that tax, so we can't speak for them. But I haven't seen any new tax in Grand Blanc Township. We checked the records, and at least the last 20 years, other than a millage for parks, that this board has had any, and that was actually by the voters that occurred. But this board, I know of no tax in the last 20 years that this board has put
What
on
about
the
raising the
residents.
property values?
Property values are something we don't have control over. Property values have to do with how much you improve your property and
Sales study.
and studies on property value. I mean, comparable sales, those things go into determining your property value. We don't determine that. It's what the market will bear. I'm hoping my property value does increase.
The property directly across the street from me sold for, I think, $20,000 an acre, and you're taxing me at $50,000 an acre.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Lane?
Ma'am, if you are being taxed at something that you think is unreasonable, you get that assessment at the end of February. Then you can come to the Board of Review. When you get that notice, make an appointment with the assessing department and residents who sit on that Board of Review and challenge what they have put your property values at.
Not true. I called here myself, and I was told I would have to take it to the state of Michigan and go through their review process.
Is she commercial?
Is that commercial property?
It's vacant property. It's probably zoned
Zoned
commercial.
It's possible that if you have commercial property, you do have to go to the tax
State.
tribunal.
It's nothing but trees and weeds.
But it's zoned.
If it's determined as commercial property,
Yes,
it's
swamps. Yeah. Because of the nursing home, you flooded my property, but,
Okay.
yeah. And I was told I'd have to take it to the state of Michigan, so no, it's not simple.
If you're zoned commercial, then that's nothing that we can do. That's state tax commission rules. They took out, commercial property doesn't have to go through the local units anymore.
Doesn't have to, but it can.
They go strictly to the state to appeal.
It can go to local.
But you can come and talk to our assessors at any time. And in fact, anybody who has a question about it should always come in and see our assessing department. We have a group of talented individuals who will sit down and go through your field card and exactly explain to you why they put the value on their property that they did.
Thank you very much.
Or if anybody wants to buy it for the million and something you have it valued at, it's for sale.
We have plenty of people that will be glad to put a sign out there for you. Yes, sir.
If I could speak from right here, if you can hear me without going to the podium.
Sure.
My name is Jack Martin. I'm a 45-year resident of Grand Blanc Township. I live at 9422 South Saginaw. But my property, I have 21 acres, and it's all contingent. There are 4 rental houses on Baldwin Road. So part of it will be considered as part of the DDA. I'd like to commend you for investigating the DDA. I think it would be a wonderful thing for this township. I have the experience of having watched this prior boards. You folks are mostly all new, for me anyway. But my property, I sold options on my property to Lutheran Church back in the 80s, I guess it was. They were going to try to build a senior retirement center. And they couldn't get the zoning from the then board, so the option was not exercised. Later, I sold the same property, or sold an option on the same property. Thank you. I sold an option on the same property to a gentleman that wanted to put in a shopping mall that's on Baldwin Road. He couldn't get the zoning from the then township board. In fact, the township board had an image of being almost anti-business because they wanted Grand Blanc to stay a small residential community. You're taking an action that I think is going to be good for all of us, and I heartily support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Any other public comment? Okay, with that, we're going to close public comment, and we will bring it back to the board.
I will again ask, please, for anyone that did not sign our public hearing sheets to do that even before you leave. Thank you.
Mr. Limata, would you like to take a moment and address a few of the questions maybe or concerns that were brought forward?
Absolutely. One of the first questions, why the district boundary map included residential on Pollock. When you create a DDA, one of the things you have to do is it has to be contiguous property. So when we looked at where those boundaries were going to be, we can't spot it. We can't put some here, skip a spot, put it over here. It all has to be contiguous property. So you wonder why some of the map is up and down. It's picking up what's most likely along the development corridor. Specifically on Pollock Road, it encompasses the healthcare district, which is zoned healthcare district, and while there is residential in there, we're trying to pick up so that we have the opportunity to capture what is an excellent growth opportunity by Genesis Health Campus. And that's why Pollock is included in there. Zoning changes because of the DDA. Again, zoning changes follow the exact same procedure that they do now. Putting a DDA in place absolutely does nothing to change our zoning laws, rules. Those are done by state statute. It's the Planning and Zoning Enabling Act that drives how that's going to move forward, and none of that will change because the DDA exists there. You still have to follow the exact same process. The question about are all the taxes collected senior center VA, again, whatever they're getting at the time that the baseline is set, they still get. So those taxing entities still get it. If they're getting $20,000 from Grand Blanc Township because of whatever their millage is, the DDA or the TIF is formed, they still get the exact same dollar amount. It's the incremental that we get to hold on to for a set period of time or for a set dollar amount. to be determined by the DDA board and this board of trustees what the threshold is for capture. Do they want the DDA to exist for 10 years? Do they want it to exist for a certain dollar amount that hasn't been determined yet? Most of people do it for a set number of years, but there's all ways to do it. Those entities still get all the same taxes, and one of the reasons why they would want to participate is to encourage that development. Yeah, they're getting their taxes, but they can look back over the last 10 years and we've had some development within this district, but not very much. So the taxes that they're getting, they're still going to get. We could wait 10 more years and their taxes that they're taking, their millage that they're getting is frozen, or they can encourage us to develop that area, and then their taxable revenues are going to come up as well. When the DDA or the TIF capture ends, if we did it for 10 years and we put $500 million worth of new taxable value in there, 10 years when it ends, they're going to get a pretty sizable increase in the revenue that they're taking in because it just saw $500 million worth of new taxable value. Cooperation with the city or solely township, this is solely a township thing. It's not driven by the city in any way, shape, or form. This is just, no different than the DDA that the city runs. We don't work with them on it. It's strictly an economic development tool for the township to use to spur development growth. So the answer to that's no. I love the question about green spaces maintained. If you look at the drawing, the conceptual plan that's out in the lobby for Technology Village area, you'll see how much green space was incorporated into even that village area and industrial, with a lot of walking trails and parks and an amphitheater. The vision for the township about green space hasn't changed. We think it's more important than ever, especially as we see these areas develop. That doesn't change the master plan or the thought of the planning commission or the township board of trustees and the importance of maintaining that. But I think it's a great question, because while we're looking for development, we're looking for appropriate controlled development that fits in with our master plan, not just wide open development. We're not throwing the doors open. The zoning remains the same. The requirements for buffers, all of those things remain exactly the same as they are now.
Mr. Lehman, not to interrupt you, but one of the things that we may mention is that in the next year we may undertake, and Mr. Mansour is actually our board representative on our planning commission, but he reminds me that we probably will be undertaking in some sort of fashion, but we're looking at a major project with a revamp of our master plan and going out to the community very heavily, involving our residents in that plan and getting the ideas. I think one of the things that if you're on social media, you see that the township is very active, at least a couple of us are on social media with communicating and transparency of what we're doing as a township. And I think one of the things that you see frequently is whenever a new business comes into this area, we see a laundry list of what residents would like to see in our community. And we joked about it on Tuesday at our meeting that immediately one of our board members mentioned a particular business that is probably the #1 pick of everybody that has anything to comment on social media, what they would like to see come to Grand Blanc. But I think one of the things that that this board is intent on is making sure that we open the doors to potential developers that want to come to Grand Blanc. We hear that, hey, look at this community, they're growing in this regard and that regard. You saw the list of the taxable value for Grand Blanc Township, and you see where we are in comparison to the other municipalities in the county. You can see that we've had growth. It's not big box stores, it's not fast food restaurants, and maybe it isn't restaurants at all. But you can see that the taxable value has been increasing considerably, hands down above everybody else in this county. And those are the people that help pay the bills for you and I to live here, for us to have a 24/7 police department, for us to have a fire department. Those businesses help pay the freight for us to have a great community. If we want to continue in that vein, we need to continue creating taxable value. We want to certainly attract places like maybe restaurants, but retail on the big box side of things has been struggling. I mean, You just have to drive to a few other townships here that do have big box stores, and you can see that now they're vacant. Unfortunately, we have one nearby us here that's been vacant for a number of years, but we are growing, and this DDA, I believe, is going to help us to open the doors even wider to development and help us to offer incentives to the types of businesses that we want to have here, that create jobs, that create a great community, that create atmosphere for the people that want to live here, whether it's making it more of a walkable community. This is how it's going to happen. We can't afford to pull the money out of our pockets to fund these things that we want to have in our community. How it's going to happen is by us attracting business here and showing them that we have a great educated workforce that they want to locate here, and that's what's going to drive this community to move forward. So I think Mr. Limita dusted off the plans for this technology village that had been envisioned before the downturn that we had, dusted it off and said, hey, you know, thank goodness this property is still available. The property owners that own that property gratefully said, hey, you know, we'll partner with you, and we're grateful that they said that they would partner with us on this. It could have been easily taken and just one simple big building put on that property, and we could have lost this opportunity to develop this into what you see as you walk into the entrance to this building. You see, you know, what was mentioned, the Villagers of Rochester. I don't know if many of you have been there, but it's just a fabulous outdoor retail area. We have office space, we have residential area, just a fantastic mix of entities that we can fit into that space. And this DDA will help us to do that. Many people think that as a board, we can go out and handpick what businesses we bring to Grand Blanc Township. You know, and so we get a list of what businesses people would like to see here. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. People that own property that sit in this room, they get to determine, if as long as it's within the zoning, what business comes to their property and who buys it. We work with whoever comes to us, and we try to see how it fits with our zoning. But bottom line is, this DDA is going to help us to promote Grand Blanc, and I believe give us some incentives and some tools to be able to bring the things that our residents would like to have here. Mr. Limita, were there some other questions that?
That's really wrapping it up. One of the statements about you take away the rights to do things with our own property. None of these things have anything to do with stopping rights for what you can do with your property. The DDA has absolutely no bearing on the rights what you can do with your property. And I get that people should be able to do what they want within reason, and that's why we create the master plan and zoning. And I'm glad that Trustee Mansur brought that up especially as our planning commission representative. We're about to kick off. Every 5 years, you're required by law to update your master plan. We're about to kick off an aggressive update to our master plan, and we really are going to hold several public hearings and meetings and ask people for their thoughts and what they want to see in their community. And I would encourage all of you to make sure that you watch our website, watch our calendar of events, watch when we're holding these meetings, get in there. If you have any concerns about what your property is zoned or what your neighboring properties are zoned, and this is your opportunity to influence that. This isn't just a group of people, the planning commissioners, who come up with this is it, although they are very capable of doing so, but they would much prefer to have 500 of you come in and weigh in on what you think and what you'd like to see. That's one of the toughest things we have when we do these meetings for master plans, is getting people to come on in and talk about it. A lot of times we hold meetings and we have 0 people there, and then you might hear things like, well, we don't like that you put that in this property, and you think, man, if I would have heard that when we were developing our master plan and our land use, we could have actually acted on it. We could have heard you. So I would encourage you to get involved. That's the most important thing. I think I've answered most of the questions I had written down. Changing zoning laws, again, I can't stress enough that the process for changing zoning isn't impacted by the fact that we've created a DDA.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Laddie, would you like to?
Just one more thing.
Sure.
Again, we've held our public hearing. Now is the opportunity for us to have discussions with the county agencies and try to convince them that this is something that they should partner with us on. That'll be a 60-day period of time where they'll have the opportunity to consider that and decide whether they're going to partner with us or whether they're going to opt out. After 60 days, we're going to create an ordinance. It's going to essentially formally create the district. We're going to create a DDA board. It's going to be made up of a nice mix of folks that own property in the district. And I heard one of our residents, Mr. Rice, talked about he has some concerns about residential concerns within the district. There is a provision in the statute that if we hit a certain number of residences in that district, then there is automatically created a residential board that is kind of a sub-body of that DDA. So I've written Mr. Rice's name down, so if that happens, then we've got maybe a volunteer. But what will happen then is there will be, once that list of potential projects and an analysis of the cost of those projects, and then the framework of the TIF will be created. Those will all be created at the DDA level. There will be public hearings. They will come to you for approval, and so there will be at least 2 different public hearings coming in the future where people will be able to have input into the projects. We'll have a full understanding of the tax increment financing, if you could ever be that excited about learning about that. But there will be many more opportunities to have discussions and input and watch this vision take shape and participate in the vision. And so for us now, we're gonna embark on that 60-day period with our county agencies, and then we will be you'll be looking at an ordinance that will create the authority.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I just,
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
I just want to remind Mr. Rice that that happened to you when you said something at the Elks. The next thing you were on a committee for 15 years.
Okay.
Just need to close the public hearing.
All right, we're going to close the public hearing, and do we need a motion to that effect, or?
Could I make one final comment?
We've already closed public comment, I'm sorry.
All right.
If you would make a formal motion to close the hearing, that would be good.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
We'd be glad to take any comments. Feel free to call Mr. Lemata or myself, and we'll be glad to meet with you. Okay?
Want to take a break so people come?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take about a 3-minute recess here and let people that would like to leave be able to leave, and then we'll get started. Okay, we will resume our meeting at this time, and thank you everyone for the wish to remain. And at this time, get to the right place on my agenda.
9B.
Make sure I have the right one.
Future resisting 9A.
Okay.
9A, let's go.
So we will, under future positioning, the board will review the Charter Township of Grand Blanc investment policy, which was adopted by resolution in 2006 and amended in 2010. And I believe on Tuesday we discussed actually forming a committee to review the policy itself and bringing it back to the board. So I don't know, Mr. Guzak, is that have you had anybody mention any interest of serving on that, or?
No, I haven't heard from anyone. I don't know if Mr. Lemata has.
I would like to serve on it, Mr. Chair.
Would you? Okay.
Yes.
So would I.
Okay, so there's your committee, and
Great.
okay, and we'll ask Ms. Solstack to serve on that as well.
Right, and I think Dennis will be on it. And then
Right.
one thing I'd like to mention, this is just an award that this is from the Association of Public Treasurers, United States and Canada. It's a certification of excellence on the investment policy that we'll be looking at. It was awarded to the Charter Township of Grand Blanc in 2006. And of course, the investment policy submitted for review meets the standards established by the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States and Canada. This was submitted by our previous treasurer, Jeff Seifer. He was actually a president of this association and did many MTA classes on investments, and I was fortunate enough to be in one of his classes, as well as talk to him personally when he resigned. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Thanks, Mr. Guzak. We'll go ahead with the committee, and then you gentlemen will bring back whatever recommendations you have for any amendments to that policy. Next item on the agenda is the board will consider a motion to adopt the Historic Perry Homestead and Nature Trail Strategic Plan as submitted and direct the implementation thereof.
I'll make a motion.
I'll support it.
Okay. Any discussion? We talked about this on Tuesday pretty thoroughly. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item on the agenda, operational issues. The board will hear a presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2017 from Plant Moran and consider a motion to accept the report as presented. We have with us tonight Dave Halisak, Michelle Lewis, and Austin Dela Cruz. Good evening, Mr. Halisak.
Good evening.
Can you pull the plug on? And I'm going to pull the plug on mine. And
well, my part of the presentation won't require that, so
Very good.
we can start on. And I must say, nothing can clear a room like an audit presentation. I mean, this isn't the first time this happened. It seems like that happens at a lot of the places that we present. You know, we're excited about what we're presented, but at the same time, I told the superintendent we're also excited about tax increment financing. So the comment I think that came from the attorney is that stuff is exciting for us. But I am here tonight to discuss the results of the annual financial audit for the Township of Grand Blanc for the year ended December 31st of 2017. As Supervisor Bennett had noted with me this evening are Michelle Lewis and Austin De La Cruz, both key contributors to the performance of this year's audit. You should have in front of you this evening 3 documents. The largest document is the CAFR, or the financial statement, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. You also have in front of you probably about 7 to 8, 9-page document, a required communication to those charged with governance. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that a little bit later this evening. But the majority of our presentation this year, once again, will be a graph presentation. We're taking really an overview of the general fund and how it performed during the year. Prior to this evening's meeting, Austin, Michelle, and myself did meet with the township supervisor, the township clerk, the township treasurer, township superintendent, as well as the finance director to cover the large document in detail. So if you went through that, you'd see it covers the general fund, the water and sewer fund, a number of special revenue funds, as well as some trust funds. So there's a lot of information that's covered within the document. So it's important that we do spend the time prior to this meeting to go thoroughly through the results of the audit, really cover the different components in different sections of this audit to ensure that the information that is being provided here this evening is truly the information that was turned over for audit and is summarized appropriately. While we do summarize the information that is provided by the township, this document is truly the township's document. The only part of it that's truly ours is the audit opinion. And our opinion, once again, is an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give a set of financial statements. She's going to email it to me. What that means is these statements, as presented, fairly reflect the financial position of the township as of December 31st, 2017, and the change in that financial position. And the change in that financial position would be the revenues, the expenditures, the statement of cash flows that are reported and recorded within the statements. So before I turn it over to Austin, like I said, normally I think I say this every year before we're not going to cover everything within the document, and it's really going to be through the graph presentation. But there's always one. It seems like it's a different part every year that I really want to make sure that we do discuss. In this year's topic of further discussion, actually in the document, is on page 49. So if everyone who has a hard copy of it could turn to page 49. You know, and listening to this evening's presentation, considering a DDA and what that entails, and some of the discussions that, that came out, obviously, taxes and financing, and governmental finances is a key component of, of the township and really what this board deals with on an annual basis. And that really starts, the audit really, if we're taking a look at any cycle, is kind of the end product. The beginning product is the budget itself. So this year's financials, which ended December 31st, were really, December 31st of 17, were really the product of something that began towards the last quarter of 2016. And that's when you're really rolling into your budget process. And really why I want to focus on this year's, and why I think it's important to look at what this township board has done with the budget, is the focus on revenues. So we've talked about this at previous presentations, but when we take a look at revenues within the township, probably 80 to 90% of the revenues that are generated for township general operations are outside of the control of this body. Property taxes really are limited by the millages. The second component of property taxes is the taxable value, and I think the township superintendent made that clear during the DDA presentation, is that's really nothing you control. There could be growth, but you've also got Proposal A and Headley, which really limit the amount of growth that you can have as it relates to taxable value. Secondly, you've got your second largest source is intergovernmental revenues. For the most part, that's state shared revenue. So that's the constitutional revenue sharing that's coming through, collected at the state level and passed through to the local level. So you, again, don't have control of raising or lowering that number. So what you've been trying to do as a board is estimate what those revenues are and set an expenditure budget accordingly. So when we take a look, and I'm going to focus on really on the revenue side here, and you'll see the actual revenue, and Austin's going to cover the specific components in a minute, but you had about $14.8 million of revenue that came through and was reported in the general fund this past year. Some 16 months ago, before you had any of this good information, but based on the research that you had done to prepare this budget, you were estimating that number would be $14.4 million. $14.4 million. So that means you were forecasting 16 months in advance and came within 2% of the actual number. That is, I want to say incredible, that is pretty incredible. And a lot of, as I said, information that you really don't control. So when you take that and say, well, how does that impact how you budget? It impacts it a lot, because most budgets are revenue driven. You're not going to try to spend more than you're receiving in any given year. So the key is how good are you at estimating what that revenue is? If we take a look at 2017, the township board and the procedures and the processes that you want got you to a very good number. So what I would say is continue, because that's going to, on a go-forward basis, allow those who are reviewing this information and have confidence in this board's ability to project revenues and essentially live within the budget.
So we should keep the crystal ball that Dennis has in his office.
Whatever you're doing, let me tell you, whatever you're doing is work. You can see that from when you nail revenues like that, and you can feel confident I would say, boy, if you were in 5, 6, 7%, I'd be pretty happy. To be within 2, that's pretty precise. But then you feel confident in what you can spend on an annual basis. You don't need to necessarily worry about overspending, and at the same time, you're not saying, well, geez, this number's at 16 million and we can spend away. Well, if you projected 16 million and budget the expenditure side that time, we'd be having a different discussion tonight. So I just wanted to make sure I brought that to this board's attention before we got into the specifics. Normally we don't talk about a budget too much when we get into the audit approach, but I wanted to make sure, to make those comments and really applaud the way you handled this budget for the 2017 year. I'm going to turn it over to Austin, who's going to cover the graphs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys should have a graph with you guys. I'm just going to briefly go over it slide by slide.
Just tell me when you want the slide change.
I will. You can, next slide. All right, so this first graph shows a 3-year trend of general fund revenue. Revenue was just slightly higher than the prior year, driven mainly by an increase in other revenues. And this is a result of the township evaluating how the general fund allocates administrative charges to the water and sewer fund. Go to the next slide, Scott. One more on the expenditures. There we go. Moving to the next graph, general fund expenditures saw a large increase from the prior year. And this is mainly driven by the township making additional contributions to fund post-employment benefits within the general government and police department.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Mr. Mansour.
So, I'm comparing the excuse me, the revenues versus the expenditures for 2017, and it appears here as though we spent about $500,000 more than we took in. So, I mean, so I would expect to see some kind of brackets around something in the report here, but can you help me, kind of connect the dots on that?
As far as why the increase in expenditures compared to revenue?
Well, so we brought in 14.8, we spent 15.3.
Yeah, so last year you guys had an assigned fund balance for post-employment benefits, and
Yep.
so that was money set aside for those expenditures. So there was no related revenue for that during the current year.
Okay. But somehow it looks like we spent more than we brought in.
Right, so in the previous year, you guys had an assigned amount that you guys put to spend on those expenditures. So that was money that was brought in the previous year. So in the current year, the revenues, these graphs are all current year revenues. If you're looking at the expenditures, approximately, I think it was 1.7 million maybe that you guys assigned last year. Those expenditures came out in the current year.
Okay.
Showing the money we set aside last year
Was
comes
spent
out
in the
this
current year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so
Yep.
it inflates our expenditures for this year above
Correct.
revenue.
Yep.
Probably the easiest way to get to it is we bring our general fund balance back down to the board mandated 12 to 15% of operating expenses. So that's all we're doing is we're saying, here's where we're at with that fund balance. What are we going to take down? And that's the assigned balance that we then use to pay down the unfunded liability. So that's the difference that you're seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, and kind of as a segue into that, on the
Question,
next slide.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Question to the Mr. Chief.
Mr. Massey.
Question. So this is part of the 15% of revenue that we acquired to have? Is that what I understood you say?
I think if you go to the next slide,
Yeah.
You'll see exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so on the next slide, this graph shows the general fund's unassigned balance as a percentage of annual expenditures. The township aims to have between 10 and 15% of unassigned fund balance equal to the annual expenditures. And so you guys have been able to fall within that range for the past 3 years while still assigning money for post-employment benefits and capital projects.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if I could just real quick go back to the question, I'll go back to page 49 again, if we might, on the budget. I'm going to let you kind of share, but just try to answer that question. So the township did indeed, so we'll look at that third column under actual, and you'll see that the net change in fund balance was a $500,000 loss, but we're not going to call it a loss, it's expenditures and X. So you had budgeted originally, you thought there'd be a $20,000 number. If we look over to the original budget, and the amended budget, actually you had planned on actually using $1.7 million. So you were ahead of budget, but the use of fund balance is fine. Public Act 2, 1968 allows that as long as beginning fund balance plus revenues is greater than expenditure, the current year expenditures, you're compliant with the Budget Act. So yes, it was at 500,000. It's actually less than the planned use for the past year, and it's all okay under Public Act 2 of 1968. Sorry. No.
Moving to the next slide, kind of showing a listing of all revenue and receipts of the township. Oh, one more.
One more?
Yeah. So other than the general fund, the township has other various sources of revenue throughout the special revenue funds, debt service fund, capital project funds, permanent cemetery funds, and the Department of Public Works. The township also has one fiduciary fund in which you guys are holding money in an agency capacity for other governments. As you can see, this makes up a large portion of the annual revenue and receipts. However, as shown on the next slide, the township only gets to keep a very small portion of that amount. So of the $55 million of receipts and revenue on the previous page, 35% of that the township has to distribute to the school, 10% to the intermediate school district, 31% to the county, 7% to the community college, and the township is left with roughly 17% of that.
So if I may, this would be a good graph if there's any questions on the DDA capture. Yeah, because really, the school and the ISD would not be capturable under the DDA, but the other three portions were, and if you work the math, you'd be able to see that. Just to use the audit approach to help you with the DDA, it could help in explaining any questions on that.
Thanks, Dave.
And that is the last slide that I was going to cover. If there's no more questions, Michelle's going to go over the letter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I heard that 17% from Dennis, and I said, man, he's stealing Austin's thunder.
I have the pie chart from the last one in my office that I handed.
There you go. Well, I'm glad that you had accurate information, and we could prove that with the audit. What I have in front of me and what you have in front of you is this letter to the Township Board, and I'm going to cover that with you today. The first part of this letter is just the required communications to the board. At the beginning of the audit, we send out a letter that says this is what we're going to do with the audit, and we solicit any questions, comments, etc. So this is the closing of that loop of the audit. And as we had planned, we performed the audit as expected. Moving down here, we say no new accounting policies were put into place, no new standards in 2017. We also talk about certain accounting estimates. So estimates that are important to the financial statement would be your unbilled water and sewer receivable. That's an estimate because you bill after the people actually use the water, so you have to estimate that period in which you have not billed yet. Additionally, your net OPEB and your net pension liability are important estimates in the financial statement. Those are determined by actuaries with certain assumptions. At the very bottom of page 2 here, we talk about difficulties performing the audit, and at the top, disagreements with management. We are pleased to announce none of those had occurred. If they had occurred, you would have known before this date anyways. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Management had corrected all entries that we had proposed. There were very minimal entries, and nothing rose to the level of materiality.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Massey?
Question.
Sure.
If you had disagreed with management, give me an example of something.
So if management did not agree with the way we wanted to, that gap would account for something, and we were at a standstill, it would be something that we would have to communicate to you, because we probably would qualify our opinion if it was the level with which that it would be material. So we would talk to you about that before. We're required by auditing standards to tell you that before we issue our opinion.
I'll use an extreme example. If, for instance, during the audit, finance said, we do not plan on reporting in this document the net pension liability, which for the township's a pretty significant number. One, it's not GAAP. So two, we'd have a disagreement because we would ask finance for position as to not how they wouldn't record that. We'd probably come at an impasse. And to be honest, if we had a disagreement, this wouldn't be the first time we'd be discussing it. That would be an immediate communication at that point in time that we had an impasse, and then we'd have that formal communication in writing versus being before this board at this time. My guess is we would be able to convince finance to report that liability, but we'd still want to discuss kind of what the process that we needed to get through to get to that conclusion.
And just a matter of information too, Mr. Massey, how many weeks are you folks here during the audit? Probably
We're about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks usually.
So they're on site about 3 weeks, and then also the executive committee here, along with Mr. Limita and our finance director, Ms. Sostak, has met also formally within the last few weeks. But the finance department works very closely with them when they're doing the audit. So
yes.
There's plenty of opportunity for, if there is any issues, for those to be raised.
Yes, absolutely. One thing you will not notice in this letter is sometimes this letter has 3 sections. It only has 2 today. That is because we do not have any internal control deficiencies as far as significant deficiencies or material weaknesses to present to the board tonight. That really just goes to show you how well your finance department is doing in keeping those records and preparing for audit, not only on a year-end basis, but on a continual basis. They close the books within the 2 months before we get here, and it goes very smoothly. So the second part of this letter is legislative informational items. There are things that are going on at the state level that we wanted to make sure that you knew about. The first couple items talk about the financial outlook of the township, how much we expect the state to increase state shared revenue. Property taxes are starting to go up. Those values are starting to raise. Not by anything that you're controlling. The F-65 is a form that you file at the end of the year. Kathy is on top of that. They're filed online. Legacy costs. Legacy costs are a big deal right now in the state of Michigan. They're a big deal to the township and to this board. The state has made some regulations, some rules that you have to follow now in reporting those legacy costs, and they dictate what to do if you aren't at a certain funding level. Your OPEB liability next year will be the first year that that entire net OPEB liability is going to be recorded on the front of your statements. So that is a new accounting change. It's not a new liability. That liability's always been there. It's just where it's recorded on the financial statements. It's not on the back of the financial statements. It's right up front for everybody to see. On page 5 here, in the middle of the page.
I have a question before we turn
Yeah,
the page.
sure.
Am I on here? No. For legacy costs,
Yes.
so we're at 60.4% funded.
For your pension?
And how does
Yes.
that play into the GASB? What is the level that is required by the state without some sort of
corrective plan?
Plan of action or corrective?
60%.
Okay.
60% right now. So you are above the funding level.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
We also have an update. The MERS actuarial valuation just came in, and we're at 68%.
Perfect.
Oh, yes.
That's what, but that's not,
Mr. Limita, what was it previously before this current?
So
60%.
60.4, which was the close of business of 16. Now we just got the one for the close of business for 2017, just came in, and it is at 68% funded.
Yeah. And that is a function of your additional contributions that the board has decided to make towards that plan and higher investment returns. But the fact that you're paying additional contributions is really helping to drive that number up. Your OPEB plan, right now, we show that your OPEB plan, under the new standards, it will make your unrestricted net position actually a negative under the new standard. However, these numbers are of 2014. So at 12/31/14, you had a valuation to determine your actuarial valuation amount. So your unfunded liability at December 31st, 2014 was $30.2 million. However, since that point, the township has continually made additional contributions. You've invested your money in the MERS retirement healthcare funding vehicle, so you're earning a higher rate of return. And we would expect your new valuation that you're approving tonight, those numbers should be quite a bit lower, and your liabilities should be quite a bit lower.
Our number last year was, as far as interest that we earned on that, was quite substantial, wasn't it?
Yeah, we really, if you look at the changes that we made, we no longer offer retiree health care for new hires. We negotiated that retirees pay. Now, anybody who retires after last contracts went into effect, now pay in retirement for the first time. We moved our investment vehicle over into the MERS OPEB retiree health care funds. So all of those things that we did have added up. And like I said, I'm excited to see how this comes out, because I think it's going to have a very significant impact to where we're at. We were only 14% funded as of 2014.
Right.
And I won't guarantee that we'll be at 40% funded, but we will have made significant inroads into that unfunded liability.
Yep. And those are all decisions that the board has made to decrease that liability. So on page 6, we talk about those additional reporting that is due to the state now. Public Act 530 requires some pension reporting to the state. Public Act 202 is the guidelines that you have to be 60% funded under your pension or 40% funded under your other post-employment benefits in order not to trigger the corrective action plan by the state. Following on to page 7, we talk about state revenue sharing. The state is projecting a 5.3% increase in 2018's fiscal year budget, so it continues to increase. Page 8, we talk about personal property tax. You're now getting the reimbursements from the local community stabilization authority. And then the remaining items are just some reminders, dark stores, community dashboard, the state of Michigan, and administrative charges. I know the township just recently looked at the administrative charges that you're charging between funds. So we encourage you to continue to do so in order to make sure that the funds are being charged properly from other funds. That's all I have. Do you have any questions for us at all? No? Okay. Again, I'd like to thank all of the board and definitely Kathy and her team, because they did make this a very smooth audit.
Thank you, Michelle. Just a couple quick items. As you probably heard, the budget, state budget for 19 was passed within the last two days, I believe. We're making our way through that, especially as it relates to the revenue sharing. What we're seeing is on page 7, this is our preliminary glance through it, is they are projecting a revenue, constitutional revenue sharing increase from the $798 million to about $832 million. So that, I mean, that's to be split amongst everyone, but that's what the projections are. The other key, and I know we talked about it in our meeting a couple weeks ago, was how they were going to handle these local community stabilization authority repayments, and there was really 3 different proposals, one from the House, one from the governor, one from the Senate. It looks like after all of that, at least this year, the distribution formula is going to remain the same as it was last year, which was none of those proposals. So I know there was concern was whether or not it was going to look a lot like revenue sharing and be a per capita. It looks like that, at least in the current year, has stopped. The last time, I just want to comment on the fact that, you know, Michelle had indicated that there weren't significant changes, proposed adjustments as it relates to the audit. As a result, we didn't have a significant deficiency or material weakness. And while, that makes it a little bit easier for us, what it really should do is it should make you as a board feel good about the information you're getting throughout the year. So if we're not proposing, significant adjustments at the end of the year, that means the information that you're receiving, financial information you're receiving throughout the year, is pretty accurate, which I know you're making decisions on, and really trying to feel confident that the information that you're making decisions on is reliable. And I think we absolutely got there this year. So you should feel good about the information that was reported throughout the year. Thanks again.
Mr. Mansour?
I have a question.
Sure.
So if I recall properly, last year when we made this presentation, there was a note about material weakness in some of our systems here. And I wanted to know if that had been adequately addressed, in your opinion, this last year.
So I don't have last year's letter with me, but what I can tell you is we do take, as part of our performance of the audit, we do cover last year's significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, go over that and ensure that 1, 2, 3, or 4, however we reported, have been addressed and are not recurring. So if you're comparing any one year to the other and you see one that's dropped off, it's not because it wasn't tested.
Okay.
We address that to ensure that it's met compliance in the past year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you
All right,
very much.
thank you very much.
And thank you, Ms. Sostak, for your department's work on our finance. Okay. Do we need to take any action on this, Mr. Laddie, or
I think
It's a motion to accept.
we just make a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
So moved, Mr. Chair, to accept the report as presented.
Okay, there's been a motion to accept the report.
Second.
It's been supported. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Okay. Item B, the board will consider a motion to authorize the superintendent to execute.
What about it?
I'm sorry? Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
I'm sorry. When did you say we're going to get the OPEB numbers?
Oh, for the valuation, it will be, we're asking you to approve moving forward the next item on your agenda, and then she will, if that goes, we'll move it forward. It'll probably be in October by the time we actually see the actuarial valuation report.
So item B, the board will consider a motion to authorize the superintendent to execute an actuarial valuation report agreement with Rod One Consulting Company for the purpose of determining the actuarial valuation of the township's other post-employment benefits, OPEB, as well as the newly required GASB or GASB 74 report for the cost of $12,900.
That's so move.
Support.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr.
Quick
Mansell?
discussion. The Rodwin Consulting Company, how long have we been using them?
It was before my time. I know that the last, and it's been done every 3 years, I believe I have at least three reports in my files, so I don't know the answer, but I know that we've had at least the last three valuations were done by them.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Well, Gabriel Roeder was with MERS, and they did it before that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item C, the board will consider a motion to reschedule the August 7th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting of the board to August 8th due to a conflict with the election, and the November 6th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting to also be rescheduled to, I'm going to add in here that if you don't mind, that we move that meeting, I guess it would be to the 7th, would be the following,
The next day.
to November
Yes.
7th, if everyone's okay with that change, that motion. If somebody wants to make that motion.
That's so move.
Support.
Motion
I'm sorry, who
supported.
made the support, please? Thank you.
Mr. Atkins? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item D, the board will consider a motion to approve a request for increased flat rate daily wages for election workers at the request of the clerk, from 175 to 225 for election inspectors and from 200 to 250 for chairperson and co-chairperson. I want to have a little bit of discussion on this before there's a motion, if we could.
May I? Gentlemen, I put before you tonight, based on what I thought were some of your concerns, it's stated today. Based on the discussion Tuesday night, the original proposal that the Election Commission made to this board was to go to 175 and 200. And then it was during the discussion that this board, understanding the length of time election inspectors work, you started adding the $12 and the $15. And I brought back the 225 and the 250, thinking that, well, if you wanted to spend that money, that was the average that we were paying for this first election using those numbers. Since there seemed to be concern about that, I started calling the larger townships. There are 17 townships in the Genesee County area. I left off calling those that have under 10,000 people. And this is the proposal that I got with what they charge their inspectors, their co-chairs, and there's only one community that's larger than us, and that's the city of Flint. And I talked to Inez Brown, who has been there for a number of times, and she said, Kathy, we've been under an emergency manager, and I need to improve our rates, and that is right now ongoing. And so I don't even want to share that discussion. But I did want you to know that I had talked to the largest community. And when I looked at them, I wrote down what happened, and I've talked to the human resource director and our deputy, and with the time they spent doing the hourly rates, I am proposing that you just take the original proposal that our election commission came forward with to go to 175 and the 200, a flat rate, making it easy for the staff. It's in agreement with and close enough to all these other communities that are larger than us. We have a total of 17 precincts. These others have under 10, and some as few as 4. So I appreciated so much what you were offering, but when we did the math and the time it took to do it, and since you felt, you know, that it was an excessive increase, this is to give you a better comparison. And I'm just reminding you, the Election Commission came forward with the initial proposal earlier this year, the 175 and 200, and all the confusion happened in relaying what happened during the May election. So I would like, if there's any discussion, that you accept this proposal based on my talking with the human resource people and my deputy and myself to make it easy for everybody. And our election workers were pleased that they were paid for the mandatory hours they spent here to learn all the new equipment. So I think I'm being fair to make this change, if you'll consider that.
You don't have to oversell it.
Scott?
Okay.
I think we'll.
I make a motion.
Okay, you're making a motion?
I will,
Okay.
to accept the 170.
Okay, let's.
I'm sorry.
I'll support it, and we can.
Hold
Okay,
on a
Mr.
second,
Thomas.
guys.
Okay.
So you're making the motion to change, so
Go back.
you want to change the motion that's in this.
That's
in
on the
packet right now.
agenda. Yes, to go back to the memo that's here, to what was originally
Okay, all
proposed
right,
by the
all right.
Election Commission,
All right.
and
I
forget
got
about
it.
hourly rates.
So you want to make it totally entire, my suggestion would be, Clerk Lane, to make a motion that we pay the Grand Blanc $175 per inspector, $200 for the co-chair and $200 for the chair.
And that is my motion, Mr. Thomas.
Okay.
If now that I've,
I gotcha.
okay, and Mr. Mansur, you're supporting that.
I'm supporting it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so, first of all, I mean, I think that this, you know, I think this is the right thing to do. It's consistent with what we talked about in April, but my question is, when we had this discussion earlier, didn't we already agree to these rates?
No, what you agreed to before the May election
Yep.
was 175
Yep.
and 200, or
Oh, okay, so this is
$12
just-
an
okay.
hour,
Got
or
it.
$15, whichever is greater.
Okay.
And that's where, that sounded good then.
Yep, I
But
guess.
the time to do it, you know, and then when I gave you the average, you were really shocked by what the average was for a simple election, as was I. And then after listening to you gentlemen Tuesday, I felt that it would be easier for everybody to go to a flat rate, and since the other rates I proposed seemed really up, I'm going to stop. I'm
Mr.
suggesting.
Bennett?
Yep, all set.
Mr. Supervisor, I gotta correct that the original was not 175 and 200. The original was 175 and 225. I distinctly remember there was $50. If you go back to your board sheets on Tuesday, from Tuesday, it even says, request from the clerk from 175 to 225, and from 200 to 250. I'm mistaken, I'm sorry.
Okay, so there's been a motion of
Yeah, I'm
175 and
totally
200, it's
sorry.
been seconded. Any further discussion or concerns with that?
Wow, I made a mistake.
No problem.
That's all right.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Item E, the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase of the plan review module for the on-base software in the amount of $70,050 and authorize superintendent to execute all required agreements.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we discussed this pretty thoroughly on Tuesday on the reasons why and how this is going to move us forward. I'm not sure if anybody has any new information or any new questions.
I don't.
Okay. With that, all those in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? Item F, the board will consider a resolution to approve the request from the Greater Flint Hockey Association to be recognized as a nonprofit organization operating in the community for the purpose of obtaining charitable gaming licenses.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay?
A question.
And I know, yes. Mr. Atkins.
I believe we were, I don't know if we were just going to put some notes in their request, but I think we discussed maybe.
Mr. Lemata has some information, and also the applicant actually, I believe, is in attendance.
The applicant is with you today, so he can come on up if you
Please.
would, Jeff, and just maybe answer any questions that they may have.
Thank you for being patient and remaining.
Good
Jeff
evening.
Baird, the director of the Greater Flint Hockey Association.
Excuse me, may I have your name and address again?
The name's Jeff Barrett, B-A-R-A-T, 3504 Kirky Drive.
Thank you.
Mr. Atkins, did you have any questions? Or I know, if you can just tell us, I think I heard that you're going to conduct a raffle with the license?
Yeah,
or-
we want to conduct a raffle, one of them 1 month raffles where you take the lottery 3 and everybody wins every month. We want to do that, start selling the tickets as soon as possible. We also want the ability to do 50/50s at our games.
Okay. So you're applying for the appropriate licenses
Right,
with
right.
the Charitable Gaming Commission, which
Correct.
requires you to report even after the raffle, the results and
Correct.
the sales and what have you.
Mhm.
Okay. And that raffle will be conducted throughout the county, or they don't require you to just sell tickets in Grand Blanc Township?
No, it'll be
statewide or
yeah.
wherever you want to sell them? And there's a specific date and time where the drawings will take place that you have to let the state know
Correct.
about as well?
Correct.
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so that was my question, and I think we're trying to understand here if this is a carte blanche thing, and so you have a raffle whenever you want it, as many times as
is,
you want to have it, and or is this just
it's-
kind of a
It's a pre-approval.
Okay.
It allows us to apply for a license. If we want to do a raffle, or say we want to do 50/50,
Yep.
the middle of next month, we got to give them a week's notice, give them $50 or something like that. Or
So
$25.
beyond this, after this approval, then basically all the interaction is between your organization and the state.
Correct.
In terms of the frequency and the timing and all the rest of that.
And they have the state has limitations as to how many raffles per year and how many events.
I'm not sure of all of them, but we would have to follow all their
Right.
recommendations, restrictions.
So in other words, what you're doing is the correct step as the first step.
Correct.
It's refreshing for being on the board for a year and a half. This is the first time anyone's come to us, and thank you for that.
Appreciate it. It's a lot of work.
Okay.
It's a roll call.
All right. Well, good luck to your hockey program.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
This is the copy of the resolution that you'll need to
Okay.
have a copy of.
Is there a motion to move forward?
There was, Mr. Chairman, a motion and a support, and it is a
Okay.
roll call.
So, Ms. Lane, would you go ahead and call the vote?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And can you just make sure that he gets the copy back then from the resolution?
I will forward this information on to him tomorrow when I get it completed, okay?
Okay.
Or if you want to pick it up, let me know.
Okay. The board, item G, the board will consider a motion to approve Genesee County Road Commission cost estimate for a 2-inch asphalt overlay project on Cook Road between Holly Road and McCandless Road for $156,657, and authorize Township Supervisor to execute all related documents. This project is at no cost to the township and made possible from the additional state road funding allocation to the Genesee County Road Commission.
I so move.
Support.
So I've.
Any
point of
discussion? Mr.
Discussion.
Mansour?
So on the item here again, we've mislabeled this thing. It's not Cook Road between Holly Road and McCandless. It's between Holly Road and Saginaw,
Okay.
right? And
Yes.
and again, I mean, if we want to spend the money from the state and in the township, and this is the right thing to do because it's a big chunk, I'm supportive of that, but it just seems, like a bit arbitrary here on how we decided this, as opposed to following the plan that our departments took the time and energy to prepare, and for us as a board to review and approve, and not kind of knock off the ones in order that were in the plan.
Mr. Lemon?
Just for a point of clarification in regards to Trustee Mansour, the 3-year road plan is based upon funding, minor funding for the 50/50 money, the allocation that we're spending. This is completely two different pots of money. The funding for this doesn't require a match from us. It was a supplemental pot that they had. When we put our 3-year road plan together that the board approved, those are not necessarily a priority list of what needs to be fixed for the township. It's what we think we can get done with the 50/50 allocation money, which isn't a great deal of money. We've got $60,000 to spend annually with $120,000 match and then what they're gonna do. So when we put the 3-year road plan together, we're looking at what can we do with conceivably $120,000. Now, it would be a completely different list if we had, hey, we're gonna have an additional $184,000 in 2018. So we're not, it's not like we're rejecting the roads that were in that 50/50 money, but they're nowhere near the priority of what we can do with this $156,000 on Cook Road, that it will extend the life of Cook Road. If we were to not do Cook Road and put gravel or grading on grade tracks, for example, to improve some flooding issues, and it has nowhere near the impact of what Cook Road will do. if we were to attack the smaller projects with the 50/50 funds, we don't have enough money left over to make an impact. Like on Cook Road, coming in with our $60,000 doesn't have anywhere near the impact of what we can do.
Well, and the other problem we encounter is if the longer we let Cook go, the worse shape and the more costly it will be to ultimately fix it. These smaller roads that we're going to get gravel, it isn't as though they're going to deteriorate further. And
this project buys us about 7 years on Cook Road, potentially. And so that's the difference, is being able to do it. If we were to instead allocate it in a different area, we don't do Cook. By the time we get additional funding available for Cook, or it shows up on the road commission's list to do, maybe it's a Paisley rating of 1 and it turns into a Pollock Road and it's a debacle that we can't afford to do. And that's where this came up. And it's not like this just came up and we said, hey, let's throw some money on Cook. We meet monthly and talk about roads and what's going on, and can you guys get us any more money, and what about this? And we talk about the deterioration, and you know, they'll come in and they'll say, okay, like if you drive down McCandlish right now between Saginaw and Holly Road, and you'll see where they came in last year and they put like on that outer third lanes and they put pavement down there. That was with the idea that if we get this done, that'll save us for like another year until we can come in and do a 2-inch overlay over there. Now luckily we hadn't gotten to that yet, because if the application does go through and it becomes a primary instead of a local road, then the road commission will take care of it as a primary. They'll have funds to take care of it. So it's not like this wasn't considered. We talk about roads, I mean, literally on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis. So there's much more involved to it than, hey, we got a pot of money. Hey, what do you want to do with it? It's way more involved than that.
Supervisor Bennett, so
Yes.
so maybe if we have a series of small projects that match with the matching funds plus our contribution, and we have those lined out, I guess in order to just show a little bit of transparency, if we can kind of put in the planning there a stretch project or something like that, that if we fell into some kind of cash that we could go attack it. If we maybe add something like that to it, then it would seem a lot more like it was kind of a planned, thought-through project as opposed to kind of coming out of the blue.
Well, I want to also say this, and that our prior board, and was this board actually, prior to Mr. Atkins coming on board, it was pretty much our policy that we were not going to spend any money, township money, on the county roads, that the county owns and operates those roads, and it was going to be their money that was used for it. And so that's what we've been operating under. If we want to, look at a different course of action, I guess we can, and we can come up with larger projects than what the 50/50 money will include. But I had a meeting today with MDOT with some other supervisors and with the director of the Michigan Department of Transportation. And one of the interesting things that the state is in a very similar dilemma as local communities in terms of funding and having to match dollars from the federal government. And they have to come up with a match or they don't get the money. And in previous years, the state did not have the money to match, and so they lost federal dollars. The other caveat that's on many of their transportation dollars is that their interstates have to stay at a certain level of quality, a certain Paisley rating. They spend the majority of the money that they receive from the Fed keeping those roads up, or they're penalized and lose additional funds. And so the state has similar situation as local communities when it comes to their relationship with the federal government and receiving funding. They're aware that if we don't come up with significant amounts of funding in the next few years, our roads in the state are going to continue to deteriorate. The states around us spend considerably more money on roads, and here in Michigan, we haven't got to that point where our residents are willing, or maybe they haven't been asked, but to spend more money on roads. So, Ms. Lane?
For clarification, it would be my understanding, based on Trustee Mansour's thoughts, that we're not thinking about spending money on township roads, but we'd have a list that we've looked at that says, here are the priorities if there's a windfall from heaven that the residents even keep hoping for, so that, again, it's not like this came up, it got put on the agenda, and we're saying, okay, let's put it on Cook Road. We would have had it already a list of,
It's actually a relationship with the county, because the county helps determine those as well, because the county is going to make funds available for certain roads if we want to come up with additional funds for them. So it isn't just us giving our wish list to the county, but it's also based on the Paiser ratings, which is based on the amount of traffic that road has, you know, a whole bunch of different factors that go into that rating. So,
Right.
So if we said, hey, we want to pave Saginaw Street, well, that isn't our street, and that's
No,
going to be local
that,
county money. But
I
I
guess-
understand what you're saying, but it's a little bit more complicated than us coming
I
up
know
with a
it's
list of priorities.
complicated, but if we, again, we don't spend a lot of time talking about our roads because we're always saying it's the Genesee County Road Commission,
We
out of
spend a
sight,
lot
out
of
of
time
mind.
talking about roads.
But not prioritizing where the problems are. And I just, between Tuesday and now, I even had a woman call and she was going to beat the road commission into submission to take care of McCandish Road, so.
Well, for me to sit here and prioritize which roads need to be paved when they aren't our jurisdiction, I really don't want to open up that can of worms. It's the
Okay.
county that maintains those roads and is responsible for them.
And the
And
county-
I really don't want to assume their responsibility, but
Okay.
Mr. Limita?
Just for the board's information, I just sent out the most updated Paiser rating that we received, and it went out to the board in February of 2017. We haven't had an update since then. I just sent it back out to the board. There's a link in there that you can click on. It will bring you to the Genesee County Road Commission's Paiser rating, and you can see every road. You can see the Paiser rating for every road in Genesee County. You can go to the Grand Blanc Township tab and look at every road on there and what the Paiser rating is, most recent Paiser rating.
Thank you.
I have one thing to add.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I was going to just say that maybe we should look at this in future positioning, and I'd like to call for the vote.
Vote for
of the
what?
motion.
Okay, there's been a motion, and it's been
Well,
seconded.
I'm sorry, that's before I realized.
I just had one
Mr.
thing.
Atkins?
I'm sorry.
You know, the whole road funding is so complicated. It's even, you know, I'm not even really sure the flow chart of that. But I know a lot of residents assume that, you know, we're responsible or can fix certain roads and they're not sure where funding is. It'd be really helpful. I don't know if the state has some sort of a roadmap, if you will, or a flow chart of how the money and the responsibility flows, so maybe some other, you know, the correct entities that should be fixing some of these roads can feel some of the phone calls or the emails or the pain that.
I know that, Trustee Atkins, I know that Supervisor Bennett, I bet you every day puts the phone number to the Genesee County Road Commission on the website. And it's a great, it's hard to explain. But I'd like to call for the motion.
Okay, there's been a request to ask for the vote, I believe, and it's been,
Yes.
there's
A
a
motion.
motion seconded.
Yes, sir.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think that we have a task force on roads, and we will schedule a meeting and we can talk more about it. And I understand that you know, if we get a windfall, we need to have, and hopefully maybe we do get another windfall like this and we're prepared. But I think it's an ongoing discussion with the county, and we'll take it from there. So I appreciate everybody's input. The Genesee County also, when it comes to roads, is in the midst of hiring a new director as well. What I passed out was just some funding information as to how the funds work. But Act 51, a new guide for that is being published, and perhaps when we get closer to having the new director on board for the Genesee County Road Commission, we can either have the chair of the Road Commission join us for talking about road funding, or the new director. Item H, the board will consider a motion to approve the request from Chief Wiles' recommendation to purchase 2 2018 Harley-Davidson motorcycles to replace the current leased motorcycles for the amount of $33,800, and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related documents.
I'll make the motion. Support.
Okay, there's a motion, support. Any discussion? I think we talked about this at length on Tuesday, and our police department uses these for traffic control, for community relations. We have the Buick, or the Allied Challenge coming back to, or coming to Grand Blanc Township, and I think they probably could be very useful at that event as well. I think for, probably even for the morale for the police department, it's something we seriously should consider. We have 2 police officers that actually are recognized as experts with these vehicles, and do training of other departments with them as well. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item I, the board will consider a motion to approve the lease and service agreement between the Genesee District Library, who's the tenant, and the Township of Grand Blanc and the City of Grand Blanc, which we're landlords collectively, through December 31st, 2027.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support for discussion.
Okay. There's been a motion and support, and we'll open for discussion. Mr. Atkins?
Couple of questions. So as I read this, and we did look at this Tuesday, but it's just kind of jumped early right now. So, approve the lease and service agreement. So, a couple of questions I have. If this in fact is 2 things, and we heard the DPW.
Just a moment. Sure. The microphones seem to have turned off. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Check on that.
They are. They're all on. Mine's going too.
They've been out for a while.
Do we sound like Snoopy?
Well, there's not a whole lot of people.
Well, however
Mine
we
is good.
All right.
Okay, back on. Okay. Just for recording purposes, I just want to make sure we capture.
So I'll start over.
Thank you.
So the motion as it's written is to approve, stated, the lease and service agreement. So 2 questions I have. One is if in fact this is 2 different agreements, and we also heard the DPW director on Tuesday night state one of the services that we are covering 100% without any joint funding from the city is the plowing of the library. So I guess question 1 is the service agreement, is that the portion of like upkeep of the property? Or
Mr. Laddie?
No, it's not. It's, in my opinion, the service agreement, it has, this has two elements to it. First of all, they have the right to occupy the space, that's the lease. The other element to it is the service agreement, and I think by service agreement, it's anticipated that that covers all of the library services. You can see it in parts of the agreement where we have an obligation to provide the building and ordinary maintenance associated with that building. And so that is not what they're talking about as far as services go. I think one of the things that we talked about on Tuesday was really trying to understand the division of responsibility for the services related to the structure itself, right? But I think the majority of, when you see this in this agreement, you'll see the majority of time referred to as far as service is concerned as library service.
Okay, so just to clarify then, that would be a library budget, those services would fall in that, which comes before this board for?
No, well, I know that a lot of people know a lot of information about the GDL services. In fact, we have someone in the audience who does too, but no, the majority of, again, the majority of the services and the money that the GDL administers countywide includes their providing service in the McFarland Library, right? And so that is all the library services and all the products that are associated with the use of that library, with the exception of the brick and mortar and the surrounding appurtenances like the lawn and the parking lot. Where we get to the brick and mortar and the lawn and maintenance of the building and the snow plowing, that has fallen into another category, a subcategory of responsibility that we have and we share with the city.
Okay.
Ms. Lane, and then Mr. Massey.
Well, I was just going to clarify it again. In the law that we started in 1980 to create a Genesee District Library Board, any community within the county can have a library wherever they want to put it. It's their responsibility, if they want a library, to maintain that building, even if it's just a room. The Genesee District Library Board and the staff of the library are the services that this agreement is handling. The maintenance of the building itself is done by the municipality, and in our case, we share that with Grand Blanc Township. And that's totally separate from this agreement with the GDL to provide the library services at the location we are going to maintain.
Mr. Massey?
I have a concern because when it says agreement, what registered with me, there's some verbiage that needs to be carefully reviewed, looked at. Say, is this agreement current as of today? Now, if this the same is this the same agreement that we've had for the last, say, 10 years?
More or less.
Okay.
In fact, you'll note that this has taken effect as of January 1st of 18. So we're already operating under this agreement. But yeah, it is. So that even, I don't know if that's better or worse. But, and again, it's a bit I understand it's a two-step process with us because we're partners in the building. But no, this has been the verbiage that's been used for in excess of 10 years, and it's used all over the county.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I'm saying, should the verbiage be looked at more carefully and see whether it should be updated?
Well, I'm all for that, but maybe we can forward that to the GDL board and see what they can, see if they have some thoughts on that.
I mean,
you've reviewed, Mr. Laddie, you've reviewed the language in this
I have.
lease. Does it look acceptable?
It's acceptable because, and honestly, every 10 years we look at it again. It's probably could be more precise. It's not really outdated necessarily, but it does the job.
It doesn't.
The only problem we had here at Grand Blanc was when somebody bestowed a fair amount of money on Grand Blanc, on the McFarland Library and or the GDL. Other than that, it operates pretty smoothly. I think in great part because of the GDL board members, particularly the Grand Blanc ones that are appointed, are very good at it.
So you're really telling us that you see no need to insert additional verbiage?
Yeah, I'm going to adopt we don't quite have this theory in the law. It's not really the Hippocratic Oath, but if it isn't broken, let's not fix it. It does seem to operate pretty well. Now, it could be, obviously it could be tuned up, and I'm not, and I want to make sure that we do need to refine our relationship with the city as far as our responsibilities go for the maintenance of the building, because as we talked about on Tuesday, we're not really sure where that responsibility falls and who has what, and we should refine that and get that more detailed.
But that's a separate issue from this lease, right?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's where I was going with it.
Oh.
But I was,
at the meeting
yeah.
Tuesday.
Yep.
At the Tuesday.
No,
meeting.
I agree with you.
Yes.
And Mr. Massey and I'm sure would like to also commend the GDL board
Yes.
for their expertise.
Okay.
I'd like to commend Mrs. Bennett from the GDL. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. Because you make our boss happy.
Okay, so there's been a motion, it's been seconded.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And item J, the board will consider a resolution to approve the addition of a street light to Glen Meadows subdivision light contract.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Okay, and we discussed this on Tuesday, I think.
Call for the resolution.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
myself, Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
Mr. Adkins.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
And Mr. Mansour.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're to the topic of what you're hearing from the community that we might want to put on the agenda in the future or look at finding resolution to. I know that on Tuesday's meeting, we had a number of issues, including Embury and Grand Blanc and some trees that may be an issue on Embury. What else are individuals hearing? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted the board to know that today, the commander of the VFW came in and brought an application for them to be able to operate during Brick Street. So we're going to, as the Planning Commission and our administration, handle, they want to have, be serving food and things like that during the Back to the Bricks program. And I know Director Lloyd is dealing with the parking for different things, so.
They shut down operation during that, or?
No, it's,
Okay.
they want to have an outdoor.
Oh, an outdoor area.
Outdoor tent,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Tent with
Okay.
things, you know,
All right.
again, there will be different things like that that come up. In order to do it, they have to submit an application.
Right.
We got our first one today, so I'm just alerting you that that's going to be happening. And on behalf of all of the women in the world, happy Father's Day to all of you gentlemen.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
On that, we've been supplying food at no cost for Back to the Bricks at my brother's stores. And the only permits we are, by, the state rep puts it together. So we have to go to the county and do it.
Well, there's also a
Well,
form
you
from
need to
us.
meet with our zoning department then, Mr. Thomas.
Tim Snow.
I do have a question in terms of hearing things from the community, maybe through you to the chief, if I could, not to put you on the spot, but so the Embry and Grand Blanc Road that we talked about, so I was watching it a little bit more, and so from Dort Highway, you know, obviously we know people just don't seem to have ample amount of time to turn. That would be going west back toward Fenton off of Embry onto Grand Blanc Road. It seems as though one of the bottlenecks is Dort Highway as people are going north to turn right onto Grand Blanc Road. You know, they stack up and, you know, you don't get a chance to turn out of there. So do we have any ability to do a study there and see, like, you know, maybe a no turn on red, or are there anything we can do outside of a light, or what's within what would you recommend then?
No, we can certainly recommend a study. We do that frequently for various intersections. I know they're completing one at Grand Blanc and Embury now. We can certainly move that. I don't know if it'll encompass the Dort and Grand Blanc intersection as well, because they're in such close proximity, but if not, we can request that. We did one at Reed and Porter for school buses coming in, traffic coming out of the middle school and elementary school there. So we can certainly do that easily, request that and have them do that. I would, off the top of my head, I don't know if a no right turn on red from northbound traffic going to Grand Blanc it may slow down the problem at Grand Blanc and Embury. I think it would cause bigger issues at Dort and Grand Blanc.
Backing up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chief Wiles, can you comment? I know one of the things that has been keeping the police busy is we have two construction projects. One is Fenton Road is closed between
Grand
Blanc Road and Cook. I should know it, I live right there. And then the other is the Hill and Belsey roundabout. So I don't know how, the phones I think have slowed down a little bit on that, but
They've
from your
slowed down a
perspective.
lot on our end from
Okay.
calls and complaints that we were getting, whether in the office or through our social media. they have slowed down dramatically. Just for the board's awareness, when that project officially kicked off that first week, we hit that really hard, especially the Hill and Belsey area. We stopped over 100 cars that first week that were in various violations trying to cut through the zone, cut through Rite Aid parking lot, speeding through subdivisions, whatever the case may be. Since then, we're still targeting that. We're not hitting it quite as hard as we were, but we're still targeting that on a daily basis. It has slowed down dramatically, the dangerous driving behaviors. And knock on wood, we haven't had any crashes out there as a result of that construction. But we are still out there. There's still a heavy presence out there of police officers. That's our B district. We have 4 districts in the township and the police department. That's our B district. And their daily assignment is when they're not responding to calls for service, they target that area. So they're out there frequently, same as the Fenton Road project. We got a lot of complaints for a while there. People just, they were ignoring the road close signs, just driving through the construction zone on Fenton Road.
Didn't see it.
Well, they saw it. They didn't care.
No, I didn't see it.
So we targeted a lot of cars out there. There's a lot of enforcement out there and education out there. That has slowed down. That's transitioned into now speeders on Cook Road. So it's a little game we're playing. We're trying to stay one step ahead of them. But the complaints that we were receiving, they're almost non-existent now.
Okay. I know the projects are coming along very well. I've seen some of it up close and personal, and the roundabout, they're getting ready for that Mansour statue. Yeah. But actually, it should look very nice. I've seen some photos of the cement work is progressing on the roundabout, and Fenton Road is also looking very good. I was through there last night. But thanks for your work on that.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So, Chief, you're saying that we cannot do a cosmetic effect with the police present?
We can't do a what?
In other words, dress it up, make it look good, have the police out there for one day of a week.
At Grand Blanc and Embury?
Yes.
We can certainly target cars there. That's not a problem. I think the problem comes in when you start getting a person out of that car directing traffic, then it becomes expected.
No, I don't mean
Well,
not doing that.
Part of the problem, Mr. Massey, though, I've thought about that. And right now, the people going west on Grand Blanc Road from Embury, I've got to say that when there's an opening, I'm not sure everybody's coming to a complete stop, because there's such a short burst of time for cars to go through there. And I've thought, if there's a police car waiting there, that 30 car backup is probably going to be more like 75 to 80 car backup, because as soon as there's an opening, as many cars as can get onto Grand Blanc Road going westbound shoot across there. I don't know if that's good, but otherwise that would be backed up all the way to.
That intersection has been somewhat difficult to figure out. We thought the Holly Road construction, Holly and 75 may have played a role in some of the traffic backup. And then the Fenton Road project playing, and the Thompson Road project all playing a role. Well, Holly Road's done. And, you know, Fenton Road, well, in a few months will be nearing completion. So it'll be interesting to see what impact that has, and what the overall road study will come out to be.
Well, I'm sure that next year, as they start the Dort Highway extension, I wouldn't doubt that Cook Road will have to be shut at some point. I don't know if that'll be next year or the following year, but you know, I've seen some complaints about traffic in Grand Blanc Township, and one of the issues when you have growth, and you know, we're in a growth stage, is that you have increased traffic and you have increased road construction, right? So I mean, we want growth. We're going to have some pain.
I will say, knock on wood, last year we were down in traffic crashes in the township, and so far this year we are on pace to be down from last year. So the officers are doing a really good job out there, handling those busy areas.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
I think one of the problems that I'm seeing, when you grow up in Detroit, every mile road and every side, it was always done in squares, and you didn't have to go so far. And for my way of thinking, had Genesee Road, the one half of it that is in the township, which we don't have responsibility for roads, but the half in the city comes all the way through. If the half in the township would have come through, that would have been a more reasonable detour to do a Holly. But when you look at even going down Cook Road, Embury Road is the only road between Cook and Grand Blanc Road. how much further do you have to go to get from just, we are not putting those roads in our plans when we're putting in subdivisions, and people aren't donating their land to do these things, which does remind me, the Auckers did volunteer to provide the land to finish off Genesee Road without cost. I was asked again about that, and so I'm saying it when I'm thinking about it.
But, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Would it be practical for something to go on Facebook that the chief is looking into the congestion problem?
I think Mr. Sears mentioned that study should be done on Embry and Grand Blanc fairly soon here. I know we've had a number of people ask for it, a few of the businesses as well. So I've seen the emails regarding it. So I think hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can actually see that results, and we'll probably do something on social media, I would guess, with that if the road commission comes up with. But I don't know that any solution is going to be quick, you know, unless it's, I mean, even a stoplight takes, you know, time to engineer it and what have you. So.
They'll probably put in another roundabout there.
Oh, no.
Well, we can only hope. But,
oh, no.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes, I just wanted to mention for all the people that are at the Concord Green, you know, that hasn't been completed yet. And when I talked to Mr. Sears about it, he said it'd be another 3 weeks because we were trying to get the total bill because we have not been able to bond that yet. And of course, we've got a lot of residents been coming to the front office and calling our front office, wondering where it is. And of course, just so everybody knows, it's watching this, it's at least 3 weeks out before we get the bill, and then hopefully we can.
So just for our board's knowledge, what Mr. Guzak is mentioning is we have a subdivision, Concord Green, that elected to have their streets paved and did a special assessment, and we're waiting for the final bill because there was some additional work, and so it'll be bonded and people will make their payment, but some people want to pay that now, and so that's kind of the discussion with that. With that, let's move to board reports. Mr. Mansour, anything on planning?
Yeah, so let me just go through a couple of items here. First, from a planning commission standpoint, the last meeting we had was a very interesting meeting. We had representatives of the MTA and Consumers Energy there regarding the CNG station at the corner of Dort and Maple. Yep, it kind of expands, adds capability to the existing site there. And so it's going to be a pretty interesting thing. They're going to install a lot of equipment in terms of storing and generating compressed natural gas. It's going to involve actually the installation of a high-pressure natural gas line coming into the township in order to provide for that. And basically the MTA buses are all going to be transitioning to CNG. So there's going to be a lot of activity there. There's going to be a lot of people parking their cars there, bus drivers, as they go and they make their rounds and things. And there's, besides the filling station for the buses, there's going to be a side that's open to the public as well. So that's that's a great new capability for the township. Okay, so that's the Planning Commission. Going into the Metro Alliance. So a couple things there. We approved this Transportation Improvement Program, Amendment number 12. Basically, there was a number of new items that were added there, but none of them inside the township, and they were all basically funded through MDOT and other existing funds. However, there is an MDOT project that's scheduled to improve an improvement to the signals at M54 and Saginaw Street. So that's coming up, I think, in the calendar year 19 timeframe. And the final item is there's a call for projects for being issued. The applications have to be in this fall for projects to put into the next round of the Transportation Improvement Program. There's various categories that we can maybe take a look at there, that if there are some particular areas, we maybe can get them into the queue and at least try to front load the system, or at least make application inside the existing funding system for our roads. So if there's congested areas, if there's areas where that need improvement from a PASER standpoint, they measure those, but if we want to put a little extra effort behind that, that may be a way that we can grab some of those dollars for improvement inside the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mansour. Mr. Thomas, anything with Parks and Rec?
At 5:30 today, we had a Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and we met with Yo and Yo and went through completed our audit for the financial statement for the Grand Blanc Parks and Rec. I have it here, and if it's okay with you, Supervisor Bennett, for time reasons, and my head hurts from the numbers from 5:30 on, can I do this in the last meeting of the month?
Yeah, actually, maybe it would be possible if you could provide a copy for the audit to Mr. Limita. We can scan it and make it available to our board. I don't know if that's of interest to our board members. Is that possible,
I
Mr.
have
Limita?
the letter of assumption letter that I'll see if I can get a clean one because I've been making notes in this for a month.
We should be able to get an electronic copy from Yo and Yo.
Okay.
I'm sure they can send you.
Okay.
Yeah, if
Unless
we
you want to
can-
read my notes for a month.
Actually, if you could request an electronic copy from them, we can make that available to our board.
Send it to Superintendent Limita or to everyone?
Just go ahead and send it to Mr. Limita, and he can send it out.
And then, do you have an issue if I report on it the last meeting of the month?
No,
Thank you.
fine. We have a chance to look at it then. We'll ask you all our questions.
Super duper.
With that, Mr. Massey with the Fire Commission?
Yes. The Fire Commissioner meeting is June the 19th at 6 p.m. I would like to see as many of you as possible at this meeting. Please come out.
I heard that the city is presenting, the city of Grand Blanc is presenting some information with regard to their request for funding levels or something along those lines?
Yes.
Okay.
The city will be there.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Atkins, have you had a chance to have any zoning board of appeals meetings yet? Or no?
No.
Okay.
Nothing yet.
All right. Mr. Buzak, anything from the treasurer's office?
No, nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Our tax bills will be going out when for summer? When do those hit the mail?
Well, June 1st is when what?
I'm just listening.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something. No, June 1st is
June
when.
1st?
That's when we have to send it to them, and then it would, it's June 1st.
June 1st was 2 weeks ago.
No, that's when we send it to the printer, you mean?
That's when we gotta get into the printer and get everything ready.
So they'll be coming out later this month?
Later
though.
this month, yeah, later.
And we have a newsletter that will be inserted with those for the township.
Yeah, I hope that made the deadline, did it?
Yes.
Great.
Absolutely. Ms. Lane, anything?
No?
Okay.
Other than we're already we've got a whole tray already of people that have returned their applications for an absentee ballot for August 7th. So we're already swinging into that.
Good deal. Mr. Limita, anything?
One thing, the last time we met as a joint Planning Commission and Township Board meeting, we had tentatively scheduled June 26th meeting for our next joint meeting between Planning Commission and Township Board. That was in my notes to see if we really wanted to move that forward, if you guys were prepared to hold that meeting. Generally, we meet an hour and a half before our 7 o'clock meeting, so that we get about an hour and 15 minutes of joint meeting in. I know we've had a couple of long meetings this month so far, but I just need to know what the board's prerogative is.
Mr. Mansour?
Let me make a kind of comment there. So I'm really, for sitting through a number of planning commission meetings between our meeting, joint meeting, and then March and now, I would be surprised to think that we have enough progress in some of those areas to have a productive meeting with the entire township board. So I would look to put that off 30 to 60 days.
I would be happy to do that and review it back maybe for the fourth Tuesday in August meeting.
So I think it would be good to move it outside of July.
Okay.
Mr. Laddie, the 60 days would be from today. Now, let's see, this is June 14th.
Correct.
So
Yes.
we would be probably talking at that August meeting a little bit about our DDA.
Yes, sir. And also, we will, and during that time, and we can't take any action until after the 60 days, but I'll also get you a version of the ordinance that would create the DDA authority. And we'll also we'll give you background information and information on the next steps moving forward, because it does start to pick up speed after that 60 days.
Okay. Is everybody okay with us holding off on scheduling a joint meeting with the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay, we'll look at August then.
I think you'd even be better off looking at September with everybody going on vacation.
Well, we'll take Mr. Mansour's recommendation, and if you can let us know when it's
Yeah,
looking.
if something changes, I'll let you know. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Limita, anything additional?
The only other thing for the the board to know about is that the bike grants, the bike path grants that we had applied for with TAP through MDOT, and then the MNRTF grants through the DNR. The actual representative from the MNRTF grant for DNR is going to be here next week and take a look at what we were proposing. The initial committee that looked at the TAP grant rejected our application, but they asked us to resubmit, but commit to doing phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time, even though it would take a couple of years to do so. So we're in the process of working through that with the Genesee County Metropolitan Planning Commission folks who helped us put that grant together, who actually represented us down in that meeting. Somewhat frustrating, because while they totally buy into what we're trying to do and looked at what the board's approved path plan is, their problem is being able to approve it because the phase 1 along the Dort Highway extension isn't immediate connected to the other trail. And so they'd really rather do the Embry Road connection that would connect from Grand Blanc Road down to Cook, which is great, but we're nowhere near prepared for that. And one of the, obviously, we're trying to work through was being able to take the synergy of working along with the Dort Highway extension. One of the biggest concerns I have about that is it has to do, it crosses a wetland, so there's a wetlands mitigation study required while they're doing this. We get to piggyback on there, and they're going to leave us enough room. I don't know that will hold if we have to do this and come back after that's done, and then they're going to require us to do our own wetlands mitigation. If that's the case, it bumps the cost somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. So it's really frustrating. The Metropolitan Planning Commission came back with, we can apply for a local TAP grant up to $450,000, but that does change the financing considerably. I don't want to try to do them all at once, because our point was, if we did it in phases, we do the phase 1, we're going to apply for $300,000 through the DNR. Phase 2, we're going to apply for $300,000 in the DNR. If we lump them both together, we lose that funding opportunity. So we're still trying to work through it. I just want to let you guys know where we're at. We're still going to keep moving forward with the DNR grant while we look at our options, but it's just frustrating because it's the closest we got. And I talked with Alex on the phone personally before it went into committee. He shared with me what their concerns were going to be, and when I tried to explain to them that we had to take advantage of the phase 1, as crazy as it sounds, that it's not connected to the other trails, the existing trails, but we can't miss out on the opportunity to go with Dort, and we just weren't able to get there. But I haven't given up. We're trying to do a different twist on it, but financially it may slip through our hands if we can't do it the way we had initially asked about doing.
It is very frustrating. I know we have this opportunity while the Dort Highway extension's under construction in the next year or two to take advantage of, the economy of using their being there and getting the mitigation and the drainage and what have you. But I don't know, we're gonna have to figure out some way how we can take advantage of that. But anything more on the sirens, Mr. Limita?
Yeah, we got a price form. It looks like it's going to be $468. Does that ring a bell?
$439 per siren.
$439 per siren. We have 7 sirens in the township.
So we don't need to take any board action. That's low enough that we can
Well, I mean, this is an emergency, we've got to get them. I mean, it was unfortunate the way it came to us, but our emergency sirens, our weather sirens, they are just being shut off. And,
Right.
you know, we knew it was going to happen one day. We just didn't know that they were going to send us a notice that says, oh, by the way, next week we won't be able to do this any longer, and here's your share. But we're still working through it. We got the price, and we'll be prepared to move forward as they go through. They're going to do them all, and we'll respond accordingly.
Right. Part of the dilemma is that there's certain municipalities that may not be able to do it immediately, but I guess that doesn't cause us to not be able to have ours operational, from what I understand, so. Okay, anything else, Mr. Lemina?
That's it.
Mr. Laddie?
No, I promised Mr. Atkins and Mr. Mansour that I had used my time up on Tuesday, so I'm
No
I'm
executive
done. No, I don't have
session?
anything to add.
I'd really like to
Okay.
discuss the roads.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Support?
I thought I was
All
going
in
to die
favor?
for lack of support.
All
Aye.
in favor? Any opposed?
I am so.
Thank you, everyone.
I am so brave.
Have fun.